Hello everybody and welcome to a very special presentation of the DC Omnibus 2027 Fantasy Draft. You do not have to adjust your screens unless there's like a smudge or something on them because it is I, Krisis with a K, coming to you live from Wellington, New Zealand. I'm so happy to be with you today. It's a beautiful day here and it's a beautiful project that I've been working on for quite some time. So before I do any hellos, let me tell you what we're going to be doing in the video today. So I have gone through DC's complete history of Omnibus releases. Omnibus, of course, being one of the biggest release formats out there, but for DC, they have an even bigger one dimensionally, that's absolutes. But I've been through all of the DC Omnibuses for every year, and I've graded them based on like their popularity and based on how niche we might think they might be. And also, are they Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Justice League, Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Post-Crisis, Post-Flashpoint, New 52, Rebirth, 2020, or just brand new? And from that, I came away with some data defining what it looks like to build a release slate of DC Omnibuses, and that is what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you my magic number, 52 DC Omnibuses I think that DC Comics might publish next year. I don't know if they're really going to do 52. I'm going to explain why I use that number. And then you are going to get the opportunity to do that too, because I did a little bit of a data project and there is a omnibus draft for you to fill out and track over the course of the year to see how you did, because I want to beat you. But you know, you might be a better omnibus prognosticator than I am. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go over that data sheet so everybody knows how to use it. The link is in the description below so you can play the home game, including new and improved. Now you can submit your picks to me so I can have everybody's picks and see who did the best and tell everybody next year. If you're somebody who already filled out the Marvel Fantasy Draft about a month ago, guess what? There's going to be an update to that sheet too. You just have to import one new sheet and then you can submit your picks for that too. I will show you how to do that in just a moment. So we're going to say hello to all the lovely crushers who are here on the stream, and then we're going to dig into the how of all this, and then we're going to dig into my picks for what I think DC will be releasing next year. Not what I want, but what I think that DC is going to do. Sorry, it's glitching out for a second there. Let's see who is here early. And my number one was Logan Wayne saying it's draft time, baby. Let's go. I think that this one is more intriguing than the Marvel draft because DC's new collected edition department hasn't really established a pattern yet. And that is true. And we are going to look at that with the data. Superjop is here. Edwin Billiot is here. Kia ora to Wiccan Solar, who I was just checking out their YouTube channel. They are here in Wellington, possibly the viewer closest to my physical location at this time. Yorna Pauls is here. Cedric and Ellen, who recommended me this French manga by French drag queen Cam Hugh. I think I had Cam Hugh's name a little bit too in my brain this morning because I think I tried to do a little bit too much all at once, but that's fine. Cam Hugh is one of the most beautiful faces in all of drag, and I cannot wait to read what kind of graphic novel would come from her mind. Cameron Ulrich is here, who's looking for Chuck Dixon, Birds of Prey to be on the list. Jade Rabbit is looking for an ultimate Batman Halloween, or a Batman Ultimate Halloween. Super Panda can't listen to this live, but they'll listen later and then they'll hear their name because I'm saying hello. Dr. Zero is here, as is Saz Murph. James Abril, the Cerebro of the comic loving internet. Lance the Library is here. One Wheelchair X, who just a week or a month ago was here ranking X-Men events. Amazing stream. It's gotten so many views. Thank you so much for your support. And he has just finished a show and a first aid course tomorrow, so can't stay long, but always with us in spirit. Nick A60 is finally here to catch a live stream as it starts, and we all love saying hello to people who are catching a live stream for the first time. Only Kane is here. Puddin' Tame saying howdy from Queens. What time does it supposed to start, Ryan? Whatever time the internet starts working is when it starts. Bree B1 saying greetings from Michigan. I love hearing where everybody is. Don't like dox yourself or anything. LOCD Daria is here. D Marcel, who I think we've all lost track of how many live streams he's seen. It's into the 20s. Jamie C40, oh, it's not coming up. Jamie C40, 799. James Rhodes. Mr. I am Space Money. We know it's not Lamb Space Money. Nathan Stevenson. Jesse says, what? Paul Wu saying good morning. Richard Fearing. William Lee. And Adrian Montanez. Welcome to everybody who is watching this live and anybody who's catching it on the replay. I'm so happy to have you here. Okay, so as promised, let's talk a little bit about how this voting works, and I'm going to show the Marvel version. Actually, no, I could show the DC version. I could show the DC version too, because as I mentioned, the Marvel version many of you have already done, and I made a small improvement to it so that you might need to have a minor awareness of Google Sheets to use, but that's okay. I'm going to teach you exactly how, and then we're going to go over my picks. So let's add this to the stairs. Oh, no. There we go. That's not so bad. So this is the spreadsheet, which is linked here in the bottom. Some of you are already in it. I can see a little anonymous badger already using it. And if you saw the Marvel fantasy draft, this is very similar. So you're going to open it up and you're going to see a page of grades of your draft, because we're not just picking any 52 books. We're picking 52 books that apply to the rules that I'm about to go over. And as you pick your books here in your draft picks, there's a drop down where you can assign it a number 1 to 52, because you get 52 choices. So let's say we just pick Action Comic Weekly as number 1. All of a sudden we have 1 pick selected, but your ballot still needs work because you're failing in all of these ways. And so once you fill out all 52 of them, then it will be complete. So I'm going to show you my Marvel ballot, which you've already all seen, so you can see what a completed one looked like. On the Marvel ballot, you were allowed to fail in 1 of the metrics. On the DC ballot, you've got to pass them all, but they're a little bit easier. So I did in fact pick all of my points here. So here we are, build my draft picks. So if you were to go down my Marvel sheet, and you don't have to pick not picked for everyone you're not picking, that's just how I remember I've ruled them out. I ranked Marvel from 1 to 60, and so my ballot was approved. So I have this list of all of my Marvel picks from 1 to 60. This auto-generates, you don't have to do anything. And if you've already done Marvel ones, you've got this in your sheet. Here's the new thing that you may wish to do. If you open the original Marvel sheet, there is now this lovely new tab called How to Submit Your Picks. It auto-concatenates all of your picks into one thing that you can copy and paste into a form, and it links to the form. So all you have to do is open it, it would auto-populate, and if you don't have it in your sheet because you did your sheet previously, just use this and do copy to existing spreadsheet and add it to your version. As soon as you add it to your version, this should work, because it's as long as you didn't rename any of your other sheets, and then you just go copy, you go to this URL, and you paste in your Marvel picks, or if you happen to have DC picks, you paste those in too. Feel free to submit 2 separate times if you'd like to get both of them submitted. If you want me to talk about how successful and intelligent you are on air, you need to tell me what name I can call you by, and that is the only required question on this form. If you just want to keep it to yourself, that's fine. There's no reason you have to submit. And then in the event that I should email anybody about anything like, hey, you're a winner, you can put your email in here and I could tell you. Win what? I don't know. That hasn't been decided yet. So that is the sheet. The link to the DC sheet is in the comments here below, or in the description here below. And the Marvel sheet is linked on the Marvel video. And the form to submit is linked within those sheets. And hopefully that explains everything. And if it didn't make any sense, please leave a comment later and I will explain it. Okay. So now, Superjob saying, this seems like too much of a headache for me personally, but I hope everyone else has fun. Well, you know, this is really for the biggest data nerds amongst us, Superjob, and you don't have to like go all out. It could be fun to just browse down the list. It's the full list of everything that was on the Tiger Eyes poll, and you could just be like, hey, what do I think might come out? You don't have to play by the rules. You don't have to actually play the game. But some people, when they originally played the Marvel game, were like, oh my gosh, I really want to compare. Don't you want me to submit? So I put in the time and I figured out how it was going to work. Okay, and a couple of late hellos, including one from Andrew Lingard, and also I saw, oh my gosh, Samantha here, kia ora to you, and Hash is Dead 52, a new 52 if you will. Well, let's start talking about that. So, I don't want that one again, remove. We want this one. There we go. So, let us talk about my picks for DC's omnibuses. And let's start out by saying, what is DC's release strategy? Now, you saw very similar slides to these for Marvel, but DC's numbers are different. So this on the left is all of DC's omnibus releases historically. And they had released one omnibus prior to 2010, but we mostly are going to treat that as the beginning of the program because that's when it starts ramping up. And ramping up is a bit of an exaggeration. If you look, we only got up to 30 omnibuses by 2019. DC has never been a huge releaser of omnibuses. And if you look back, it's a lot of the Golden Age and Silver Age books and not a lot of modern omnibuses until they started putting out like new 52 omnibus. DC just does not have as many omnibuses on the whole released as Marvel, only about half. So DC has always been conservative, and they actually were tacking downward for many years in omnibuses. But consider that DC also has absolutes. So omnibuses are not the be-all and end-all for DC the way they are for Marvel. But in the past 2 years, there was a more than doubling between 2024 and 2025. And then in terms of what's announced for 2026, it's even higher. So are they really going to put out 52 omnibuses next year? No, that's not real. But since we're trending upward, and since we just had 41 and 49, I put 52 as the number. And that is the number of omnibuses that we are going to predict. Who knows? They might release 45, they might release 39, but I and you, if you choose to participate, are going to predict 52 omnibuses that they might release. And this does not include reprints. None of these numbers include reprints. Reprints is something totally separate from that. But what we learned from doing this exercise for Marvel is Marvel never really has a quote unquote all bangers year. They pretty much always release a mix of like, let's call them niche omnibuses, and then also very, very popular omnibuses. So what is the mix for DC? Is it similar? Is it different? Turns out the mix for DC is very, very different. If we look at the chart on the left, that huge green part of the stacked area, so that area stacks up and is cumulative, that green part is books that I rate as average popularity. It doesn't mean the run is bad. It is not a value judgment. It is based on how in demand is the material, how hotly demanded is the material, has it been reprinted many times, does it tend to sell out quickly, is it a comic that is always in the conversation. But then there's things that are pretty popular, and that's that orange smaller line below, where even if they're not a full evergreen book, they're a book that very likely could be reprinted, that people were pretty excited for, that could sell out. And then at the bottom, the red represents like true evergreen runs, things that are hot and will always be hot, like Death and Return of Superman, right? Runs that are always going to be attractive. Wonder Woman by Perez, just the biggest of the big, Batman by Grant Morrison, just the biggest results. DC doesn't have a ton of those. Green Lantern by Jeff Johns is another one, the first volume, because a lot of those have gone to absolute. And if you think about the size of popular DC runs, a lot of them are like absolute sized runs. Krisis in Infinite Earth, 12 issues. Watchmen, Doomsday Clock, 12 issues. Final Crisis, I think 7 issues. So a lot of the like popular, hyper popular, hyper reprintable DC runs get made into absolute size. And this poll just doesn't take a look at absolutes. It was just outside of my scope. But that is a little bit of an explainer of why DC doesn't have as many bona fide 5s as Marvel. But now if we look to the top of the graph, DC also doesn't go super, super obscure. You see some niche releases. That's that kind of like blue that's right on top of the green. But if you look right around where things are getting towards the 10 mark, there's also a slight pinch of another color. And that would be a true obscure release, something that barely anyone has heard of. There's no kind of positive reception or historical note about it. It's kind of truly for the fans. And DC does not do that in Omnibus. So that is going to make your ballot building a little bit challenging, because if you want to put one of those super obscure things based on how I rated them, sorry, it's totally subjective. Well, not totally subjective, but subjective, and then it came from me. You really can only afford to put a couple of those on your ballot. So I am not going to read a lot of comments right now. I want to get through the explanations, and then if you have questions, we'll go back and cover the questions, and then we'll move forward. Okay. So what does a slate of typical DC Omnibus releases look like? They keep their average popularity right around 3, even more so than Marvel. DC's average is a little bit higher. We've never had an oops all bangers release calendar from DC, but DC's probably tempted to start doing that, because as the reception for their omnibuses gets more and more positive, they have so many things. They really could do an oops all bangers year, because they have so many things that are bangers that have never been in omnibus. So if we look at the average from 2020 to 2026, the total amount of books averages only 27, because if you remember 2 slides ago, we looked and we saw that their quantity really just start ramping up in the last 2 years. So there is no guarantee that there's going to be 40 plus next year. Their average still hasn't cracked 30. And their average popularity score is 3.1. So it's a little bit more popular than not, which makes sense because DC's not putting anything with a popularity of 1, the super obscure, on their schedule. They just don't do it. So how does that break out across the popularity? For books that are potentially evergreen, 5 out of 5, DC really only puts out 1 a year, maybe 2. But it's really, they stick to that stuff in other formats because Omnibus historically hasn't been the evergreen format for DC. Absolute or certain, trade paperbacks are, and even deluxes are our evergreen formats. But DC does put out a pretty solid raft of kind of popularity for books. It's about 16% of their slate, about 5 books a year. And then there's that huge middle, the popularity 3 books. They are about 65% or about 2/3 of what DC is releasing every year. Then there's some niche books, and a lot of the books that are niche at DC are really just subsequent volumes of long-running Golden and Silver Age series. Like, there's no way that you can say like a Batman Volume 8 is a popularity 4. That's just not the case. The intense interest tends to be in the 1s and the 2s, or the books that have a really significant issue or appearance or period or artist in them. And then over time, popularity wanes. And that's where we get some of these niche books. And plus, DC does just sometimes straight up put out a more niche book. And then the popularity 1 books, very rarely, basically like every other year. It's just not a frequent occurrence from DC. So now we have to look at also not just the mix of popularity, but the mix of content. So everybody's like, there's always Batman. Yep, there's always Batman. Batman usually accounts for about 20% of DC's release slate. Now, of course, that shifts a little bit as the slate's getting bigger and bigger. As they've gotten to 50 on the release slate, they aren't necessarily still releasing 20% Batman, but pretty close. So your ballot has got to have a lot of Batman on it in order to be considered a valid ballot. Superman, both as a solo and a lead, historically had not had that many, but over the past couple of years is growing in his slice of the line. So Superman, as of 3 or 4 years ago, we wouldn't have said really that there's any representation. Now he's almost 10% of the slate. Wonder Woman really is less a percentage and more a fixed amount, and that's actually really common across a lot of DC. Wonder Woman almost always gets 2. She almost always gets 2 per year. So it doesn't really matter what the percentage is because she keeps getting 2 even if the number of books increase. That's actually really similar for Justice League too. So DC's ballot is very different than Marvel's ballot. With Marvel, X-Men, Spider-Man, they kind of flex as big as the release schedule gets. More release schedule means more X-Men. At DC, Wonder Woman and Justice League seem like they get a pretty consistent number of releases, not necessarily percentage of releases, and that is reflected on the ballot grading. But of course, DC, so altogether, by the way, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Justice League, they account for about 45% of DC's release slate every year. So pretty much you can just say Trinity plus Justice League is going to be close to half of your ballot if you're going to play by similar rules to DC. Now, I did give you a little bit of room to play if you're going to be making your own ballot, as I did. So you actually, for Batman, you can be anywhere in the range of 10 to 30%. For Superman, you could be anywhere in the range of 7 to 15%, Wonder Woman from 4 to 6%, and Justice League from 2 to 8%. So you don't have to hit these numbers exactly. And then we look at the eras. So the Golden Age books, if you actually look at DC's release schedule, that was very much a 2010s thing. They have not been putting out many Golden Age books in the 2020s other than Wonder Woman. Batman and Superman, they're mostly just reprinting. Silver Age books have really slowed down too. DC has really shifted to focus more on modern omnibuses since 2020. And you can see that here in the numbers. A lot of Bronze, a lot of post-crisis 80s, a lot of 90s and 2000s, a lot of New 52, and then less Rebirth in the 20s, but there's still a steady trickle. And the thing to make note of is at the bottom there, things that are published within 3 years of the omnibus coming out, which I think of as brand new. It's like a pretty quick, or the run coming out. An omnibus being published within 3 years of the run coming out is actually about a 10th of their schedule. So they do every year get some books out that just finished. And that's really tricky to think about because you've got to be like, wow, how many runs have even finished in the last 3 years that are like omnibusable runs? Now, luckily, most of that is usually Batman, right? Because there's always some new Batman run. Tom King, Tynion, Zdarsky, Ram V, Mariko Tamaki, and that really anchors that 10%. But now if we're looking at 10% of maybe 40 or 50 books, you actually need 5 pretty recent books if you want to hit that number. And so you cannot just rely on Batman to get there. So, can we predict DC's 2027 schedule? The challenge is to assemble a 2027 Fantasy DC Omnibus release calendar. We're going with 52 titles, just because that's the magic number, that conforms as closely as possible to their average release schedule from 2020 to 2026. Prediction number 1, which you'll see mine in just a moment, is the book that is most likely to be printed. Number 2, the second most likely, down to 52, which we would guess would be the least likely to be printed. So this is just a fun exercise, but if you want to get a little competitive about it and make it a real fantasy draft situation, we can score those. So measuring our success, if our prediction number 1 winds up printed in 2027, we get 52 points. If our prediction number 2 is printed in 2027, we get 51 points, all the way down to getting prediction number 52 correct. That's just worth 1 point. Okay, so that is why, if you want to, you can play along at home. You don't have to. You can just listen to my predictions and then mock me mercilessly next year if my predictions do not come true. So before we dig in to my omnibus picks, I'm just going to scroll up a little bit right now and see if anybody had any questions, because it's a lot of data, and some of you are just here for the show. Jay Passan, hello to you, saying I'll watch tomorrow. Matt H is a little bit late. Welcome to you as well. Shockmaster General just got the notification 15 minutes late. That's okay. We started 7 minutes late. Hashes Dead says, personally love an absolute more than an omni. Yeah, for me, absolutes, because they're just so big, and I do not like reading them. I remember buying the Sandman absolutes like now 15 years ago. I never got even through the first one, I don't think. Only when I got the deluxes oversized did I actually read Sandman. So I've learned, for me, an absolute format is kind of like an art book format. And so I've kind of just given it up. I have Watchmen in absolute, I have Planetary in absolute, and that's really it. Because I just find that I don't really do anything but page through them. If you want to ask me questions such as that about my collection, my reading habits, my opinions on things, we do have an after show just after this. And if you're watching live, the link is in the description. If you're not watching live, it's available later on replay as a link on Crushing Krisis for patrons of Crushing Krisis. Okay, just checking to see if anybody has any questions about this. Yarner Powell is saying, I failed pottery. I don't know if I can handle this. Max is, I'm here. What did I miss? Everything, Max. You mix every possible thing. Dana Andrews saying, I'm excited about DC Omnibuses and DC Finest volumes. I should mention tomorrow on Near Mint Condition at 5:30 in the afternoon, U.S. Eastern Standard Time, we are going to be talking about the results of the DC Finest poll officially participated in with DC. I've already sent DC the results. They're already cooking on the results, but you all will see them tomorrow. I will be pulling an all-nighter tonight to get all the slides ready because I was also working on this. Okay. A lot of people saying hello, but I don't see any big questions about... I do want to point this out, though, Yarner Pauls. DC has really shifted their behavior, and this is something I didn't represent in the data, but it used to be there was no guarantee that if DC started a line that they were going to finish it or take care of it or be good custodians of it. Sometimes things would get a volume 1 and just disappear. That has very remarkably changed in a very significant way lately for DC, where now it's starting to be like clockwork that they finish up a line as soon as there is a volume 1. In fact, sometimes you'll see that they have the exact same release week the next year for a volume 2. So if something came out in the second week of August, 1 year, it comes out, the volume 2 comes out the second week of August the next year. So that dictated a ton of my picks. Hello to Body by Leafield. You no longer have a Leafield body for me to model there in your profile picture. Hello to Tahere Kazimi. Okay, so no big questions, so we are going to get started. Here we go. My number 1 pick for what DC is going to release next year, and I think this is a gimme, is Superman The Triangle Era Volume 4. Why? DC is obviously on an annual schedule of these. They're coming out once a year. This is the 4th one. We've had 3 years with one each. It's lovely when DC tells us exactly what's going to happen. Now that DC has cleared Death and Return, all of that material has been in volumes 2 and 3. We're now into pretty much uncollected Superman. So in a way, this stuff is probably even more attractive to people than the stuff that came before. I don't think they're going to see a big dip in sales. I think sales could maybe even increase because a lot of people have never seen this Superman collected. So this is absolutely happening in 2027. There would have to be a cataclysmic event for DC not to release this. And these books don't quite collect an exact year of Triangle Superman each, but pretty close, because they can usually fit between 9 and 13 issues of each of the 4 titles in it. And so it's more or less a year of Superman. And if you don't know what Triangle Superman is, it was a period of over a decade where every Superman book had a triangle, an inverted triangle on the cover. I'm trying to make one with my fingers, but my thumbs are not long enough. On the cover, and inside of it had the year across the top, and then it had a number in the middle, and the number was the reading order of that comic book in the year. So it explicitly told you what the reading order of every single ongoing monthly Superman book was. Really fun at the time, made it easy to collect and know what you were missing. Now finally being collected into Omnibus for the first time. So that's a pretty easy, that's a gimme. My first 10 or 12, much like the Marvel ones, are gimmies. Batman by Tom King, Volume 3. It is going to happen next year. As possibly the biggest seller on DC's entire slate of omnibuses, it's a lock that we're going to see this run right on schedule. It's one of these ones that DC has released once a year. There's no reason not to. It's been out for a while now. It's been over for a while now. They've released it alongside Omnibus in other formats as well. There's like nothing keeping us from making this happen. And there might be a Volume 4. It depends on if DC decides they're going to cut right at the end of the in-continuity material and then kind of have a Elseworldsy 4th volume, or if they're going to kind of squeeze it all in. But below in the box there is all of the stuff that's left for Tom King. So only 15 or 16 issues of the actual series left over. But then he does do some other writing of short stories, his kind of alternate universe, Batman, Catwoman, and also some other things that he's come back and written as well. I think this is pretty much a lock. So number 3, another one I think is a lock, is Suicide Squad by John Ostrander, Volume 3. Why? I think there's fewer, surer things than DC concluding Ostrander's one and Suicide Squad. They've kept a yearly schedule on the first 2. This has been collected before. They did it all in paperback, but clearly the omnibuses are doing well for them. It's also in DC Finest. There is no reason not to get this out. The one exciting thing about this, other than, that it's good content, is that I'll be really curious to see if it does something to put a little extra special sauce on top of the contents of the trade paperbacks, because there is some stuff beyond the trade paperbacks that they could just put in the end as a bonus. Amanda Waller does make some other appearances in the 90s, so you could put that in as well. However, DC doesn't tend to go too wild in books that have a creator name on them, like this one has Ostrander's name, so it's probably just going to stick to the stuff that Ostrander actually wrote, and they'll use the DC Finest line to collect that extra stuff. These top 3, they are happening. It's easy points. Do whatever you want with your ballot, but I'm telling you, if you want, what is 51 plus 50... 52 plus 51 plus 50 is 100. If you want 153 points, I think these should probably be your first 3 books. I don't think there's any doubt that they're going to happen. My number 4 pick is Warlord by Mike Grell. This one is only ever so slightly a risk. They put Warlord Volume 1 and Volume 2 out on an annual schedule. However, Volume 2 is out pretty late in the year this year. So there's always the possibility that Volume 3 bumps from December into January of 2028, which would steal our points from us. So, and I already screwed myself several times on the Marvel Fantasy Draft where I was like really confident, like they always put out a next volume of XYZ, but I didn't look at the date, and the date of the prior volume was December, and I'm like, oh no. So I think I put Ghost Rider Danny Ketch Volume 4 in my Marvel Fantasy Draft, but then Volume 3 slipped from December to January, so there's no way they're going to put out a Volume 4 in 2027 right now, and I lost the damn points. But this one, I'm pretty confident that DC is going to make it happen. They need to keep pushing this out because they need to get out a couple more volumes to get through all of this run, and so I think that is going to happen. Carlos Arguelles says, I'd like to see more Batman omnibuses from the 90s. I think the gap between Post-Crisis and Nightfall, and between Nightfall and No Man's Land, are 2 gaps that should be filled. And there we come into the question of how many bangers is too many bangers, because those are some of DC's most hotly requested materials. And so how likely is DC to put all of those out, or even one of those out, knowing that DC doesn't tend to go too hard on putting things out in omnibus that are the tippity top of the demand pull. So next, another one I'm sure is coming out in 2027, Batman by Chip Zdarsky. Why? DC never fails to quickly collect these modern runs. They do it like clockwork. They don't like making people wait for things when they're modern, especially not for Batman. So we already got a Chip Zdarsky run this year. I think this is going to come out like clockwork between March and May of 2027. It's going to collect the entire back half of his run, including all of the Gotham War. I think that is a pretty easy pick to make. Number 6, again, pretty non-controversial, Batman the Bronze Age Omnibus Volume 2. I love this cover. You're going to be seeing, I always use this cover. I think I use it on my DC Finest Draft picks as well, or my personal ballot picks. I just think it's such a cool cover. I love when Batman's on the cover with something spooky hovering over him. So Bronze Age Volume 1 was announced for this year. It was announced to massive excitement, which hopefully turns into massive pre-orders for DC. I think DC is probably... It's probably like a relief when they have something that they could just put out every year and they know there's an audience for, like Triangle Superman, and they have a lot of them. I mean, I know it's a relief for me when like I have a release calendar of videos and I just know exactly what the video is going to be each week. I know at work, it's kind of a relief when like a client has a really obvious schedule of things that I need to turn into them. It's just nice to have a sure thing sometimes. And so assuming that this does well and seeing how DC kept up the pace of release for Golden and Silver Age volumes in the past, I think there's no reason not for them to keep up a release pace on Bronze Age omnibuses. The only possible challenge is if some of them need more restoration than others, and that just takes time. But this is one of the crown jewels of their release strategy at this point, so I think it's pretty possible that they're going to keep up an annual release schedule on these. The great thing about DC Superdrop's out. Sorry, I missed this. Well, actually, I'll answer this first. Am I doing the full year or just the first 6 months? This is a full year. So some of these things, as I said with Warlord, probably aren't going to release until the very end of the year. So we'll have to keep grading our Omnibus ballot all the way through March of 2027, which is usually when the final books of the year are announced. But yes, this is a full year prediction because for some books, I don't want to get into if it's in the first half of the year or the second half of the year because who knows. But there are clearly some that have very fixed spots on the release calendar. But I wanted to come to Superdrop's question. Any ideas on what they'll do with Hush #2 omnibus-wise? DC isn't like Marvel in that everything has to be in an omnibus, and that's another reason that DC's omnibus slate tends to be a little bit squashed or suppressed and doesn't have all 5s in it, because DC will put out a deluxe and they will just keep putting it out. That Hush run, that will never be in an omnibus. It has, unless it's in a revised Hush omnibus to add it to the original Hush omnibus, because it has no connection to the Chip Zdarsky run that comes directly before. There'd be absolutely no sales incentive for DC to add it to a Chip Zdarsky omnibus. It's its own thing. Maybe it's probably just going to be a standalone oversized hardcover. That idea that everything has to fit into an omnibus is just not a DC concept. It's very much a Marvel concept. All right, so my number 7, Superman the New Krypton Saga. I don't think this is a very big risk because DC is loving knocking things out quickly in an annual schedule. When they say something's in volume 1, if the volume 2 is available and it's completed, they're happy to put the volume 2 out with some amount of speed. Now, the question with this one is really, is it a volume 2 and a volume 3? Or if it's a volume 2, what's in the volume 2? Because is it going to follow the characters other than Superman that starts starring in the Superman books? Or is it going to follow Superman? I'm not here to map for you. The map is in the bottom if you just want to eyeball what this is because it sounds intriguing to you and you want to read it, but I'm not actually mapping for you. I'm just saying I think a book with this title is going to come out. Now, that brings up one interesting thing about grading the ballots, because Marvel has already, I think, announced one omnibus where it's like not the exact omnibus I thought it would be, but it has the title I thought it would have. So in the actual scoring, I think in the end, I might introduce some idea of a multiplier. For example, what if we predicted that something was going to be 2 different omnibuses and Marvel puts them both out in the same omnibus? So when I actually score the ballots next year, if you choose to submit your ballots, I will account for that with a multiplier. Or if DC calls a book something and then when we look at it, it's not what we said that book was going to be at all, just has that title. We'll have to play with that later, but right now we're just predicting titles. We're not predicting maps. Okay, so let's continue to number 8, DC KO. Now, this one is admittedly a little bit of a risk. Why is it a risk? Because unlike Marvel, DC does not always put out events in Omnibus exactly 18 to 24 months after the event finishes. Sometimes DC waits a little bit longer. But Absolute Power did come out like clockwork almost exactly 24 months after the event ended. Now, the challenge with DC KO is it didn't end until January 2026. So will DC squeeze it out in like November or December of 2027? Or actually, is it a title that would release at the beginning of 2028? I may have screwed myself here putting in the top 10. I'm already having regrets. But I do think DC is starting to find that certain new runs can sell quickly. And this was a big blockbuster and a lot of people really enjoyed it. It was really fun. It kind of like had a lot of Darkseid. It had a lot of people just punching stuff. So I think they know that there's money in it. And I think they are going to put it out in Omnibus. Yes, this was very close to making it into the top 60 on the Omnibus poll. Next, this is not a popular book, but it's a book that I am willing to bet DC maintains their current standard of getting out things quickly as sequels. I might get bit on the butt on this one. Let me explain why. This is Catwoman, the New 52 Omnibus Volume 2. This is a little demanded, little acclaimed, little liked run that DC, for some reason, decided to put out a volume 1 of this year, even though there are so many other Catwoman runs that people would prefer. I think this was, at that time, the least demanded Catwoman run on the Tiger Eyes poll. But you know, it's not all bangers. So the thing is, DC is now in the practice of breaking up every one of their New 52 runs into 2 books, which means there's going to be a second book of this little selling Catwoman run. The question is, since DC put a volume 1 out, are they already committed to putting a volume 2 out, and will they keep an annual schedule? Now, based on the past couple of years, the answer is yes. We saw the Supergirl New 52 run come out on an annual schedule, but that had an upcoming Supergirl movie to motivate DC to put it out on a quick schedule, even though that run also is not especially well loved. So this one is going to be the real test of if DC is taking these volume 1, volume 2 seriously, and they have let very many volume 1s of New 52 straggle in the past. There are many that could get a sequel. Suicide Squad, I think, needs a sequel. I think, what is the other one that is? Red Hood needs a sequel. So there's no guarantee. And if we look at other recent years, they definitely have waited a 2 or 3 cadence to put a thing out. So this is my first real dice roll, and we're going to learn something really important about DC's release schedule next year. Will they absolutely stick to an annual schedule, even if a book is slightly less possible or less profitable? Or if something is less profitable or less popular, will they actually kind of drag their feet a little bit and something will be released a little bit more slowly? We are going to see. Okay, so that's risky. This one's also risky, but in a different way. This is Hellblazer John Constantine Volume 5, which is basically half comprised of Warren Ellis and half comprised of Brian Azzarello. Here is the challenge. It's no mystery that DC has set an annual pace for these. We've had 4 Hellblazer omnibuses in 4 years. Duh, I can count. But this is really the first time that we're going to have several distinct creators in the same one. And there's really no way to extricate them from each other. The Warren Ellis run is 12 issues. The Brian Azzarello run is more like 20 issues. And then there's a brief arc by Darko McCann in the middle. This is a place where DC might not actually feel the deep-seated desire to get every Hellblazer book out in omnibus. DC isn't crazy like Marvel is about that. DC might put out a Hellblazer by Warren Ellis Deluxe, because that's deluxe sized, and either include the Darko McCann arc in it, or just put that in the Brian Azzarello book, or just skip it. And then the actual omnibus might be Hellblazer by Brian Azzarello without the Warren Ellis. So if they only put out a deluxe of Warren Ellis and no Azzarello omnibus, we don't get any points because there's no points for deluxes. However, if they put out an omnibus that's just Azzarello and then they handle the Ellis separately, we'll still get points. So this one's risky. I don't know if I would put it in your top 10 if I was you, but I took the risk because it seems like Hellblazer is a pretty sure seller, and I think in some configuration, DC will release this next year. Next, number 11, Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, Rebirth Omnibus by Robert Venditti, Volume 2. Volume 1 of this is out this December, so it's obvious that Volume 2 is coming. Now, that's a big risk, right? I'm putting my money on DC following up a December release with a December release the next year. The thing is, DC's very consistent with putting Lantern books on their schedule, and there aren't a ton of hotly demanded Lantern books that they're active in collecting right now. Certainly, they're in no hurry to do the 90s. So I think that given the fact that there's not a lot of Green Lantern currently on the slate to pick from, it's going to be attractive to them to put out a Volume 2 on this like clockwork, which will collect the remainder of the Rebirth run of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps by Venditti, ending that huge mega run that starts all the way in 2004 with Jeff Johns, continues through New 52, and Robert Venditti takes it over. It finally concludes at the end of this, and then Grant Morrison picks it up afterwards. This one was very hot on the poll. It is Flash by William Messner Loebs, Volume 2. The first volume of this was out in 2024. Now, if we go all the way back earlier in the presentation, 2024 only released about, I think it was 19 books. The release slate got much bigger in 2025. So it's actually kind of a mystery that DC hasn't put this out in 2025 or 2026. Flash is actually one of their surest sellers in Omnibus. Maybe this one sold a little bit softer than other Flash books, and that's why the Volume 2 wasn't as forthcoming. This is the one that makes me nervous about Catwoman, because if DC has waited since 2024 Or shouldn't we have had this in 2025 or 2026? What does that mean for Catwoman? That said, DC is getting much better at following up on their volume ones, not really making us wait that long. This was in the top 10 of the Tiger Eyes poll, in as much as there is still demand for it from people who bought it in 2024. I do think that DC's going to put it out because why wait longer? The demand will begin to lessen because there won't be as many people with buying that volume 1 fresh in their minds. Now, the cool thing about this is when DC releases this, that with a few minor exceptions, we will have all of Flash in oversized format from 1987 to 2023, which will make Flash the most consistently collected character at DC Comics once we get this. There is some supporting material that we could still get in Omnibus. Like, we kind of need a pre-Flashpoint companion book that collects around the stuff in the Johns books. But in terms of primary Flash runs, we will have everything all the way to the end of Joshua Williamson's run in Rebirth, because there is a second Flash New 52 book out later this year. James Rhodes pointing out we did wait 3 years between July volumes, but here's the thing. We used to wait 3 years because DC's release schedule was only like 14 to 20 omnibuses a year. So there wasn't much room to do follow-ups. Now that the release slate is in the 40s, maybe that restriction has lifted a little bit, but there are people really excited about this. Hello to Underrated Cavo and also Edwin Billiot, who is needing this to come out. With all the risks, what do I think is an appropriate average wait period between omnibuses? It's, you know what, Jade? It's a moving target because DC's release schedule has changed so much in the last 2 years that we just don't have data yet. Like, we can't say that any data is consistent yet because we only have 2 years of examples of this bigger release slate. I think I'll probably know a little bit better next year. I think right now it feels like it's between 12 and 24 months for most books, but then there's a lot of older books that have really languished and haven't had a volume 2, but DC has been reprinting a lot of books lately. So sometimes what they're reprinting is also a signal of like, oh, I bet they really want to get a volume 2 of this out, and they're reprinting volume 1 to make sure that they get a sense of demand for the volume 2. Okay, let's look at my number 13 pick, Birds of Prey by Kelly Thompson. This is the first truly off-the-wall pick I think that I've had, and honestly, I think I should have ranked it even higher. DC likes releasing some newly completed runs. Usually that's Batman, because Batman or Superman, like the War World Superman stuff from Philip Kennedy Johnson, because those are the books that have the right size, the right recognition, and the right acclaim. Well, guess what? Here's a run of 28 issues. It's the right size. Recognition, Kelly Thompson has been an Eisner Award winner for Absolute Wonder Woman and nominated as Best Writer for several years running. And acclaim. Fans and critics alike absolutely love this run. I think the first issue of this is the best written first issue of a comic book I've read possibly this whole decade. I've read it multiple times. I've read it with Kid Krisis. This is just a delightful run from front to back, and you get to market it with this cover, which has Black Canary on it, Harley on it, and Cass on it. I think it makes it very saleable. So I am absolutely convinced this is happening next year. Kelly Thompson is so huge for DC right now, and we're not at omnibus size yet on the Absolute line. It's just too soon. DC's not going to be in a rush to do those in omnibus. That's just not who DC is. DC isn't like Marvel that way. And so if DC wants a Kelly Thompson book out on the market, this is the book to put out in the market. And since people are absolutely obsessed with her Absolute Wonder Woman, it's nominated for Eisner's again this year, probably will be again next year. I think the best thing to do would be get Birds of Prey out so that comic book shops have it and can sell it. Now, the one wrinkle in that is because Absolute is such a big seller to such a wide swath of people, it could be that they put this out in 2 giant kind of book 1, book 2 paperbacks, because that's at a lower sales price and at a lower price point for younger fans who are maybe spending their pocket change on the Absolute books, which are so hype right now. That is a danger of me putting it this high, but I'm telling you, DC wants a Kelly Thompson omnibus out there, especially because Marvel really only put Kelly Thompson's name on one omnibus, which is the Captain Marvel omnibus. They don't even market the second one with her name, which, to be fair, it has stuff by other writers in it, Anthony Oliveira and what is her name, or their name, Alyssa Wong. But I think DC is like, oh yeah, they've got the perfect run here. I feel really, really strongly, really, really strongly. Okay, Max would buy this. Better than Al Ewing's Sword. I think it's structured as well as, I know what you're talking about, and that is a very well structured issue. This number 1 is structured just as well. And oh, Lance, this run, it's just such a delight, such a delight. So many people want it in the comments. I mean, I love it. I absolutely love this run. A lot of fun. Love the art. And they kept the art style very consistent, mostly, with a couple of issues that stick out because they kept the colors consistent. All right. My number 14 pick. You know this is my most wanted omnibus, other than Sandman the Dreaming, which, spoilers, is not one of my picks. I think next year is our year. So this is number 14, Wonder Woman by William Messner Loebs and Mike Deodato. Why am I so confidently saying that this is finally going to be our year? Because recently DC is putting out 2 Wonder Woman omnibuses a year like they're setting a friggin' clock. And if you look at what's left, we don't have a lot of options. There's Golden Age 7, there's Breaking into the Bronze Age, which I think could happen, but I just wasn't certain enough to put it on here. And then there's basically runs after this. There's the Eric Luke run, and there's the Amazon's Attack run, and then there's the back half of New 52. Like, notice how I'm wincing? None of these are really big movers and shakers that Wonder Woman fans are demanding. This is the obvious one. And now, if they were a little bit uncertain about the Messner Loebs name to begin with, they've got the Perez books, which they're reprinting, and so we're going to be moving up towards this in reprints, which is obviously a strategy. And we already have the John Byrne book. So it's like they've perfectly set up a demand curve for this, so they have a comp exactly for how many they should pre-print. I think it's absolutely visible in their strategy. Honestly, I should have put this higher. I'm willing to put money on the fact that this is actually going to happen for us next year. I really think it's going to happen. Okay. I think it. Lance wants it in DC Finest, but Logan wants it. Jamie says, yes, please. Momin saying definitely a buy, and Shalom Warburg saying a first day buy. Yeah, I just think it's time. And again, I think their data probably shows them that if they release 1 or 2 Wonder Woman books a year, they will always sell. Wonder Woman fans have $200 a year to spend on omnibuses. So I really don't think there's any reason for them to stop that trend. And of course, as always, I am featuring hair today that is absolutely styled off of the hairstyle in this cover. She has a little bit more of a center part. That makes my face a little bit weird, but I'm always trying to get my hair to look like Wonder Woman's hair on this cover. I even had it blue at one point to look more, so the curls would look more like this, because this to me is the epitome of beauty. Okay, let us continue to Swamp Thing by Rick. I think you've taught me how to say this. Veitch and Doug Wheeler. Here's the thing. We saw an early solicit for this book in 2027, and then it disappeared. So the question is, when a DC solicit disappears, that is not always a hint that is definitely going to happen. Sometimes a DC solicit disappears and then the book gets resolicited with different contents. Sometimes a DC book gets solicited, disappears, and then reappears in a different format, like paperback, like a compendium. So even though it seems like I probably should have put this at number 1 because we've seen a solicit already, I don't trust those tricksters. I think there's a reason the solicit appeared and got yanked back. So I'd still have 15. I still would get a lot of points if this happens. And again, this is one of those ones that has 2 different runs from 2 different offers. So we might just get a Rick Veitch omnibus. There's plenty of stuff in there. It's more than 20 issues. I would still give full points for that. And then Doug Wheeler's run, which is also about 20 issues. So honestly, DC might decide to split it into 2, and maybe that's why the solicit got pulled back. And that would make perfect sense. They're into smaller omnibuses these days so they can keep prices contained. But I do think I think we're going to see some version next year, because even though they could switch it to compendium or paperback, DC has been so consistent in releasing Swamp Thing and Omnibus that I just think that it's going to happen. And Super Drop, I think the reason they pulled it back is because that 1989 series, which is Rick Veitch completing his run that was considered too controversial at the time, and it's why he left the title. I think DC is just waiting for the end of that to come out until they solicit this. That is, well, mildly unusual. We'll get to that in a moment. Mildly Unusual saying they confirmed an Alan Moore omnibus is coming in the Dark Genesis description. That they did, and we'll talk about that soon. Okay. Next, Batman Legend of the Dark Knight. So here's the thing. I know in my heart of hearts, DC is going to put this out next year. I just think the clamor for it is so huge, and we know it is one of the favorite runs of Dustin Kitchens, who is the director of their collected editions department. I just think every sign points to it coming. The polls point to it coming. Dustin's kind of smirking remarks in the comments point to it coming. The question is, what format is it going to be coming in? Because it could go into any of DC's formats. Think about it. These are only 3 to 6 issue arcs. So this could be an absolute that has anywhere from 6 to 20 issues in it, perfectly cutting off. They could put this whole series out in absolute. It would sell like fucking crazy. It would actually be, I personally, if I was in charge, I might do that. They also might launch a DC Finest line. We'll see how it did in the DC Finest voting tomorrow, but this was very popular in the Omnibus poll, so I expect that it's going to be popular in the DC Finest as well. Again, DC Finest, really attractive, a quick way to get this material on the market. But if it needs restoration, is DC Finest the best way to subsidize that? Because so many issues go into each Finest, they're almost as big as an Omnibus. But then there is also the chance that it goes into an Omnibus. It's kind of the middle ground between those two. It's maybe allows them to do a little bit more material at a price point that helps them with the restoration differently than the Absolute. The thing is, we've seen DC very willing to come out in two formats at once, multiple times with the Finest line. We got a DC Finest of Suicide Squad at the same time we got an Omnibus, and we got an Absolute of Man of Steel just around the same time that we got a Finest of Man of Steel. So I don't think DC has any problem with being in two different formats. I think one of those formats is going to be Finest. But the question is the other format an Omnibus or an Absolute? Honestly, this would kill an Absolute. Kill. Always an Instigator saying, can you give any insight to the readability on Legends? Is it jarring to jump from mini to mini? I mean, only as jarring as you find it to read non-continuity comics. If you're somebody who needs absolute continuity and every story to progress from one to the next, it will seem jarring to you. But it's basically just reading a series of Batman miniseries that are just all slightly earlier in his career, at least to start. So if you just treat it like you're reading a bunch of Batman miniseries, I don't think tonally any of them are so jarringly different from each other that I recall. I haven't read a ton of those, but I mean, I'm familiar with it. But again, it's just so good. It's so good. And there's a reason it's everybody's number one pick. And what's funny is it's not just from a gap filler perspective. You'll see an X-Men book in the Marvel poll be everybody's number one pick. And it's but that's total garbage. It's the Trial of Gambit. And people are like, but it's the next book. That's not why this is high. This is high because this is some of the best Batman comics of all time. Everybody's going to know it once it comes out. Everything's going to happen. Richard B42 says, releasing it in September ahead of the Batman Part 2 on the 1st of October makes a lot of sense. Ahmed Russell would get it in Absolute and DC Finest. Nicholas Ang is Omni Finest Compendium, however they're going to give it to me, I am ready for it. Logan Wayne, of course, how far apart do they space them out? Logan, they have shown that they have no fear of putting things out in the same release frame. I think they've put both formats out in the same quarter before. Underrated Kavo is saying day one buy. Jamie C 47.99. This is one I think they'll keep in print similar to Snyder's run. I was actually, can I say this? I was talking to a human being who has DC in their email address. They gave me no hints about if this is coming out. What I said was, in my mind, pour moi, that right now when anybody says, where should I start reading Batman? The answers I see time and time again is either get the Loeb and Sell Omnibus, which a lot of people say that should just be your first Omnibus in general. It's just so friendly and so readable. Get Snyder, because it's New 52 is meant to be just picked up from cold. Or if you're an experienced comic reader, get Morrison. And those are the only three. Nobody ever says start Batman in any other omnibus. Every so often people might say Paul Dini, but that's not a thing. Nobody's saying start Batman with Tom King. That's not a thing. Those are the ones they say. When this comes out, I'm telling you, this is going to be the one that people tell people to start with. I'm saying that, and I said that to the person with DC in their email address. Okay. Love that. Got the cover. Honestly, Moment, there's so many good covers that I'm tempted to switch it up every time, but just because I have a format that these are in now, I usually just pick up the cover that I've already established in my little archive. But yeah, there's so many great cards. So many great covers. And Nick saying the different feels between the story arcs were a part of the appeal, which I would agree. Richard B pointing out that Swamp Thing, Dark Genesis Omnibus, and DC Finest Swamp Thing are out in consecutive weeks. DC is not remotely afraid to release things close together. A great point. Super Drop, it had the pour moi and in the world. I'm not going to do it just because you gave me a quote. It's got to be a real in a world. They have happened in the same sense, I think a week or two ago. Okay, let's continue. Number 17. Now we're getting to me taking some chances. This stuff is not super obvious. Remember how I just said the DC almost always puts out 2 Lantern books a year? I think they're going to do Green Lantern Hal Jordan by Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp. We often think that Batman and Superman are these sellers for DC. There is money in them. They're lanterns. They put them out consistently. The color is green, if you know what I'm talking about. And so and plus this is Morrison, who tends to be a pretty good seller in Omnibus. Liam Sharp's art is incredible. it's just, maybe it's a little bit of a niche pick because it's so weird, but it's weird that will sell, and weird that will sell is the perfect thing to put on your omnibus slate. So everything that I am interested in seeing about Green Lantern coming out, I think this ticks the box. And again, there's not a lot of other choices. It's too soon to put out this new post-Rebirth run with Jeffrey Thorne writing it, right? He's the writer. No. Jeremy Adams. It's too early for that. The Jeffrey Thorne stuff comes after this, so they're probably going to want to put this out first. They're in no rush to do Emerald Dawn right now. Maybe we could get a Green Lantern omnibus that follows Space Travel and Heroes. That would be the only other one that seems like maybe it could happen, but I really think they're going to hit that in Finest first, and since this is after Flashpoint and not eligible for Finest, I think they'll do this one. In Omnibus, Richard B42 saying, I will buy this and it'll be my only Green Lantern omnibus, and Wiccan Solar saying, Grant Morrison's so good, I need to try this. You know what's interesting, and I've talked about this a lot, this one is so weird, but everybody's like, Morrison's so weird. It was weird in a way that I found myself able to deconstruct, because even though it relied on comic book history and DC history, it was not so perfectly attuned to DC history that you had to know specific like issues or facts or arcs in order to follow it. I felt like even as a DC layperson, I was able to be like, okay, I see what they're doing here. And that to me made it really, really fun. Also, I want to say hello to Pittima. DC's dipping too much into my pocketbook and I love it. Okay, Drops of Saturn saying, this was a wild choice for my very first Green Lantern ongoing. This may have also been the first time I read Green Lantern on an ongoing basis as well, and I agree, wild ride. Okay, did I have these? No, 18, okay. 18, so maybe this seems a little left field, but I think the data points to the fact that it's going to happen. Batman the Animated Series, Gotham Adventures Volume 2. Why? DC has been cracking through these animated adventures stuff, both in Compendium for Superman and in Compendium and in Omnibus for Batman. They got out an Omnibus this year for Batman Gotham Adventures Volume 1. There's no reason that they shouldn't put it out in October next year, especially because there's going to be a Batman movie out. This just seems like a gimme to me. I think we're going to see it. I think it's very popular. I just think there's every reason that it is going to happen. Number 19. So now we have to start picking some Batman books that are not as obvious, because we gotta put enough Batman books on the slate to make it to what DC usually puts on the slate, which is between 10% and 30% Batman. So I've already said, I'm sure Tom King is going to come out. I've already put that animated book out. We need more Batman. So this is where we have to start making choices. Some of you want to see the 90s stuff. I think the 90s stuff is so sellable and so demanded that DC is in no rush to do it, because there's other hot books that they've got, there's plenty of other hot books that they've teased that are happening. This to me feels possible for two reasons. One, Rucka is writing at DC right now, and we've seen that Marvel and DC both tend to release omnibuses for people who they're friendly with. So they're friendly with Rucka right now. I think it probably makes sense that they would want to put a Rucka book out there, reprinting his Batwoman in Omnibus, one of my favorite omnibuses of all time. So why not put out another one? Plus, this also has Brubaker's name on it at the time. I think isn't Criminal about to get a TV show? So it seems really obvious from like a market standpoint that you would want to do it. And then if you look at where it fits really easily between two other omnibuses, No Man's Land and Murder Fugitive. So it like plugs a gap without like breaching any new period. And I think that that is a really easy choice to make. It has all of Officer Down in it. I just think that if we look at all of the possible Batman books that are not like brand new Batman runs like Zdarsky, like King, this to me feels right now in this moment in the market like it is the thing that is the most possible to happen. So Nicholas Ang saying, I recently read Murder to Return Fugitive. I would love New Gotham to be collected soon. Going back a slide, Logan Wayne saying, my buddy's currently reading the first animated Adventures Compendium and is loving it. He's hoping for a Justice League Unlimited one next. Riley Jin saying, Rucka Batman is in my top 5 once. Logan Wayne, this is my most wanted Batman omnibus. Nick saying this should also probably collect the Turning Points miniseries. Okay, just a reminder, you all have been asking some very pertinent questions thus far. If you have some questions that are not so pertinent, or if you just want to ask something unrelated, there should be a link in the description if you're watching this live to join me for the after show, in which case I will go off about whatever you want me to go off about. Here, we try to keep things ever so slightly on topic, including my number 20 pick, Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. So I want to go back to a comment that somebody made a little bit earlier, that they already said in the solicit for Swamp Thing Dark Genesis Oh no, that wasn't, you just mentioned Dark Genesis. Where's the one that said that they were going to release this? It was like in anticipation of finally releasing the Alan Moore Omnibus. Here it is. Mildly Unusual said they are already confirmed that Alan Moore Omnibus is in the Dark Genesis description. However, we don't have a timeline on that. We don't know. And this is a book that's going to take a lot of restoration. That Dark Genesis book, they went page by page to restore it to as close to the original colors as possible, as performed by Jose Villarrubia, who is like the best at doing that. The pages are breathtaking. The colors are exactly the same, just kind of like slightly made more crisp, and so that they will work on the paper they're using. But side by side, there's no new choices being made. It's just accentuating the old choices. Obviously, DC is going to put a lot of care and attention into doing that in this Alan Moore run. And obviously, Villarrubia, there's only so many hours in his day. So the question really becomes, is this really going to make it out in 2027? Because Dark Genesis is coming out very late in 2026. So will they manage to get this out at the end of 2027? Or is it anchoring 2028? Personally, for moi, I think that DC has enough strong books on their 2027 slate. I would almost save this for 2028 as like a sure seller. Honestly, there's so many big hits we've already been through. Zdarsky Batman, Tom King. I think there's plenty of bangers already. And this is like the #1 banger. I don't know if there's anything more banging than this banger in terms of a release. Personally, I would maybe save it for 2028, which is why I don't have it at the top. Because it just feels like between the restoration time and between how much DC knows it's going to make them, it's just very tempting to put it in a new financial year. But the flip side of that is this is a great thing to put out right before the holidays with enough time for people to get it as a holiday gift, because it's going to be pricey, because it's going to be a 2 omnibus set. So I do think it could kind of go either way, but I think there's still a strong chance that we are going to see it next year. Okay, number 21, Flash the Bronze Age Omnibus. Now we're getting, if you thought it was boring for the first 12 or 13 picks, now it's not boring. Now we're getting into me putting my finger in the air and being like, which way is the wind blowing? Because none of these are guaranteed at this point. So here's the thing. DC has been slow to crack into these Bronze Age omnibuses of their superhero stuff. They did it for Justice League and they cruised through that pretty quickly, but there's is there any other superhero with multiple volumes? They did like a Bronze Age Batgirl and Robin omnibus previously, but in terms of the big guns, this Batman Bronze Age omnibus is kind of a big deal because they're finally cracking into that. Wonder Woman has the Diana Prince omnibus, but that's not officially a Bronze Age omnibus. Now that they've cracked into Batman, the question is, who's going to be next? It could be Wonder Woman, which I would love, but they are already into that period and the late side of that period in DC Finest. So it feels like maybe they have a reason to stay away from that for another year or two. Who knows? Maybe not. And I would be very happy and I will be there on the first day. So I don't think it's Wonder Woman. Green Lantern's kind of there already, but they haven't called that line the Bronze Age line. And so it doesn't feel like I guess they could suddenly call the next one Bronze Age Volume 1, but it feels like those are more like titled volumes. So I don't think it's Green Lantern. So it really comes down to, do I think it's going to be Superman or Flash? I think Flash's, because it's not going to be Aquaman. Aquaman does not sell well in omnibus. I think Flash's omnibuses are better sellers than Superman's vintage omnibuses. And I think the Flash material, I don't know it. I do not know this material. In my listening, I think this material is more well-loved than the 70s Superman material on the whole. So through that complex process of elimination, and because Flash is a very good seller in omnibus, and as we mentioned earlier, there's no more Flash to do between 1987 and 2023, except for that William Messner-Loeb's book, and much like Wonder Woman, Flash does tend to get 2 books on the slate every year. So if they don't do this, I guess they do that Jeff Johns companion that takes us right to the beginning of Flashpoint with the stuff that Johns didn't write. Personally, I'm actually more interested in that coming out because I would like to see that collected coherently, but something in my gut says that next year could be the year for this. Xbox by Degree saying this would be pre-ordered right away. Edwin Billiot saying Swamp Thing I will buy in all forms printed. I really struggled with it, but whether or not I'm going to get it, Edwin, because I'm not a huge Alan Moore fan. I like some Alan Moore. I'm not really a big Swamp Thing fan, and I've never read it, but I haven't read it because I wanted the original colors and I missed whatever the one time they did it in the original colors, I missed it. So it's kind of like, am I going to want to blow, it's going to be like $200, especially with shipping to get to New Zealand. Am I going to blow $200 for a book that like, I don't even know if I really want? And then does that send me down the line of like wanting every Swamp Thing omnibus? So I really haven't decided yet about Swamp Thing. Okay. We're almost halfway. Number 22, All-Star Squadron. So this is another one that I am pretty certain it's coming next year. I don't know in what format, because DC has heard the demand for this so many times from the DC Omnibus poll. It was number 8 2 years in a row. And DC is finally collecting stuff from the 70s and 80s, which they just weren't for a long time. So now that we're getting pre-crisis stuff, this is clearly important material to them, I really think they're going to put it out. And I also think they're going to put it out as a little bit of a test of like, okay, just how rabid are the fans for this stuff? Like, can we get away with doing more JSA older stuff? Because if people would buy this, even though it's not from the Golden Age, it has the team having adventures in the Golden Age. So like if this does really well, maybe that emboldens DC to do like a JSA Golden Age line of omnibuses. But I'm not so sure it's going to be an omnibus. I really think there's a good chance it could be a finest instead. So I don't think it'll be an absolute. So I think we're going to see it in one of the two next year. It just feels like it's time. Sometimes it just feels like the zeitgeist is there and the demand is there and the poll is kind of pointing in that direction. Sometimes it just feels like all directions are pointing in that direction. But I just don't know if it's going to be omnibus, which is why I have it so low. If I was making a guess at things that were going to be printed regardless of format next year, I would probably have this in like my top 10, top 15. I'm just not convinced it's going to be an omnibus. By the way, it has to be 2 because it's just such a big run. Always an Instigator saying, I need to become the omnibus graphic novel seller for New Zealand. Here's the thing. It is hard to be a retailer in New Zealand, and things are so expensive in New Zealand because you have to pay GST, which is the tax to get things into the country, and then retail space is so expensive here because land and property is really expensive here. So I do not envy businesses that are retailers in New Zealand. There's a reason a lot of specialty retailers, whether it's for comic books or swimming gear, are based in Australia and they just ship to New Zealand. Beauty products, Amazon is no Amazon Australia and no Amazon New Zealand. There's a reason that all of that is true. So we could talk about that a little bit more in the after show. Edwin Billiot saying it had great artists, and Darian Metalhead saying I will buy All-Star Squadron no matter the format. Number 23, again, taking chances. Legion of Superheroes and the Legionnaires Volume 1. Here's the thing. I'm willing to put a crisp New Zealand $2 coin on the table and say that we're definitely going to get one Legion book in 2027. We got one in 2026. I think it's just one of those lines where DC knows they can put out one a year. The fans are crazy people and they will always buy a book once a year. I think that is settled at this point. The question is what Legion book? And we're pretty much down to, I'll say, 4 choices, right? So one of the choices is they start at the beginning of the Bronze Age from when they start with Superboy. The positive of that, many books to release. The negative of that, not as popular. The next choice is that they could do either right at the beginning of Levitz's run or the Conway run right before the Levitz run. The problem with that, it's been collected before, especially the Levitz books have been collected before, I think, even in deluxe. So a lot of people are going to be like, that's on my shelf already. Okay, so then the next option is that they do the 1984 Baxter run and they just start it in 1984 because people already have the Levitt stuff that came right before it. For some reason, they seem to be really avoiding that 1984 run. I think maybe it's a restoration issue. They've shown that some of those 80s comic books are not quite ready for omnibus right away. It could be similar to what they're going through with things like Man of Steel or Legend of the Dark Knight, where they know it's going to be, or Swamp Thing, where they know it's going to be one of their biggest sellers of all time, and they just need to put in the time to make sure it's ready. So if that's the case, I don't know if it's on the table. So just looking across everything, it feels to me like 90s is really popular for DC and omnibus right now. And since they're pushing on 90s omnibuses, it would be really easy for them to put this one out. It just continues exactly from those 5 years later books, so they have a good comp. They could skip over this and go directly to the Abnett and Lanning stuff, but I just don't think Abnett and Lanning's names are big enough sellers in omnibus to go there, like, to skip ahead. I think they'll just keep releasing sequentially to, like, build and build and build and build and build the demand until they get to the Abnett and Lanning. Lance saying we need more Legion Finest for sure. There's still one. Shalom Warburg saying by Legion of Superheroes by DNA would sell like hotcakes. This could be DNA. Honestly, I would not be surprised if anything is in the slot. I know we're going to get a Legion book, especially since they put out the mildly less popular Kitts and Wade Legion book this year. I know we're going to get one. It's really hard to pick which one. So maybe I should have put this lower. Okay. Number 24, Millennium. Again, taking chances. What is it? Why is this a chance? DC, historically, has not cared about collecting their pre-Flashpoint events unless they were a Crisis event. 0 Hour, Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis, those get collected. The other events, who gives a shit? Except In 2026, we're getting a Legends Omnibus, which is the first big event other than Krisis in the post-Krisis world. So this wager is really not just a wager on Millennium. The wager is that DC is going to start doing one event a year. Now, the thing is, DC's events from the 90s, it's not just that they like aren't in continuity, or they weren't for a long time anymore. It's that they're just not acclaimed in the same way Marvel events are. Like Marvel events like Inferno, like Infinity Gauntlet, Marvel just had bigger events. If you look down the list of DC events, it's kind of like Millennium, I don't remember that. Armageddon, I don't remember that. Bloodlight, it's like a lot of things that even as a 90s reader, you maybe have no recollection of up until we get to 0 Hour. And I don't think that's just because of my age. I just don't think the events hit as hard. And the only one they've really done in Omnibus is War of the Gods, which they really only did as a supporting book to the Perez Wonder Woman books, which I stupidly didn't buy at the time. So point being, this is not guaranteed. But if DC is going to get on the path of starting to do an event per year, Millennium would be the next one. And when Billy says if Millennium gets an Omnibus, it's the end of the world. That's the thing. It's not very popular material. Legends, definitely more popular and more of a pedigree. So it'll be very interesting. It'll be an interesting signal if DC does this, that they're really looking to like collect a lot of stuff. And Shalem saying maybe they should just do Armageddon because they need the original reveal for Monarch. Okay, let's continue. So this is one at number 25, Deathstroke the Terminator by Marv Wolfman, Volume 2. This is one of those straggling Volume 1s that came out in like the 2022, 23, 24 frame, that even with the increased output of omnibuses in 25 and 26, we still don't have a Volume 2. Deathstroke is pretty recognizable, pretty popular. This has Marv Wolfman's name on it. Maybe the first one was a slightly soft seller and that's why they weren't in a big rush to get it out. But this is 90s and it's still Marv Wolfman. And now they've progressed the Titans line a little bit farther to get a little bit closer to this. So maybe they wanted Titans to catch up a little bit. So I maybe have this a little bit high, but it seems like just one of those things like DC, it seems like they're more into the idea of capping off runs now. And so this will finish this run, and I think that that is an attractive choice for them. I was actually reading Deathstroke at this point. I really like this. Okay. Always an Inskater saying, do I see more of 90s events being bundled with their primary book rather than released on their own? So that's really interesting. And the question is because we saw, I believe Legends is in the Suicide Squad Omnibus. So the idea is that a lot of times DC's 90s events kind of like or late 80s events and 90s events, often very closely tied into a specific title, and you kind of like need that book in that title to understand it. Millennium kind of is like that with Green Lanterns. I think that DC doing that with the Legends in the Suicide Squad Omnibus is just a nice sign. It shows that they're like open to doing that, and Marvel generally doesn't want to recollect an event. One of the only times they've ever done that is in the third Phoenix Omnibus. They generally do not recollect events in standard lines. So it's just a nice showing from DC that like they're not afraid to put whatever is relevant into the book. I don't know that that means that they're always going to do that. I just think that it's like a nice sign. Okay. I hear somebody opening my gate, so I might have to go answer the door in a moment, in which case, I guess just talk amongst yourselves. But let's keep going. Now we're at the halfway point. Why do I have one of DC's biggest bangers at the halfway point? What is going on, Krisis? Just hold your horses. Because DC just put this out in 2 formats this year, Absolute and DC Finest. So we know that they've said we're working on the restoration to get it ready, all of it ready for Omnibus. Clearly, for Absolute, they only had to do 6 issues. So like that's not the end of the world. But there's 4 hardcovers worth of content to put in 2 omnibuses. So it's going to take some time. So the question is, are they in that big of a rush to put it out in 2027, a year where there's a lot of other bangers already on the schedule, or is this more of a 2028 book? Personally, much like with the Swamp Thing, I would save this for 2028. I just don't think there's a rush to get it out. Let that omnibus keep selling through. Let the demand continue to mount. Put this out in 2028. However, certainly if they have it ready, there's no reason to not get it out. Superman is really big business right now. He just had a movie. The omnibuses are selling. This helps complete that whole line of omnibuses that will eventually connect on the other side of the triangle. So it wouldn't shock me if it's out in 2027. It wouldn't shock me if it was out in 2028. That is why I have it exactly in the middle here. My number 27 pick is another Batman pick. Because again, we need a lot of Batman picks to make the world go round. This is Batman Road to War Games by Brubaker, Azzarello, et al. Why? again, we need some heavy hitter Batman books, and I just don't think that they're in a hurry to get to the 90s. I think they're actually going to let the finest play in the 90s for a while. So with War Games out in 2025, 2027 feels like an appropriate gap to wait for this that comes directly before War Games. Sorry, I don't know all the Batman events the way I knew X-Men events, so I kind of have to, there's like math going on in my head when I'm like, War Games. The interesting thing about this book is that this crosses over a couple of unique brief Batman runs that have been in their own deluxe hardcovers or omnibuses, like Hush is kind of technically in this period. So is Under the Hood, although that could be in another omnibus. So the real question with this book is like, would it actually sequentially collect things, or would it jump around a little bit? I'm not here to answer that question. I just think any book that clearly is the book that matches up to War Games on the other side is probably a book that there would be to pick. Richard B pointing out there is a Superman movie in 2027. I don't really follow that, so if you say there is, then there is. Okay. Number 28, Green Arrow by Judd Winnick. Now, I do not think that DC is at a spot where they're putting out a Green Arrow book every year. I think they're at a spot with, if we were to include reprints, we're almost getting a Green Arrow book every year. So this is really a coin flip because there's two books this could be, and I may have chosen wrong. So they could put out this Judd Winnick book, which immediately follows the Archer's Quest book that was out this year. Or they could put the book out that would directly follow the two Grell omnibuses, which would be kind of a Connor Hawke book. Again, I think this is a coin flip, much like I think Man of Steel is a coin flip between 2027 and 2028. I think it's a coin flip. I absolutely, in my heart of hearts, believe we are going to get one of the two Green Arrow books next year. I do not know which one it's going to be. I'd be happy to be wrong. I think they're both runs that are deserving of an omnibus. I think that because we have Archer's Quest out and because the vibe of Archer's Quest continues directly into the vibe of this because Winnick wrote some of that and he writes this, I think this is just the more natural book to put out next rather than the book that follows the Grell books, which Grell isn't writing, so it's more of a change. DC seems a little hesitant to put Chuck Dixon in Omnibus for some reason, so this feels like a slightly surer choice to me. Also, always an indicator pointing out that Grell said Longbow Hunters is getting an absolute in 2027, which means maybe DC would want to stay away from that period with other releases, but who knows? We've seen that they'll just put adjacent things out together all of the time. 29, now we're getting into me just taking chances. This is Justice League of America by Meltzer and McDuffie, and it is the first half of the Justice League run that comes after Infinite Crisis. Here's the thing, much like Wonder Woman, DC puts out Justice League books every darn year. The question is, what is there left to do? There's really just that one last Bronze Age volume, and then we have everything up until International. Then we have the 3 International volumes. We already have New 52 Justice League. So there's really limited options left. We basically could get an omnibus that follows the 3 International omnibuses. I don't think they're in a hurry to do that. We could get a JLA Volume 3, which would be Joe Kelly, which would come after Mark Waid. That's possible. We're just getting the Mark Waid book this year. They might want to see how that does in sales. Or you could put out the Brian Hitch Rebirth Justice League run, which is the only other gap, because then after that we have the Tynion Snyder run. I love that Hitch Justice League run, but it was not well received by fans. That's how little Justice League there is to collect. That's really not a lot. I mean, there's other volumes there. You know, we would need more than just one volume to get through the 90s to JLA. We would need more volumes of JLA to get to Infinite Crisis. But in terms of gaps, there's not a lot of gaps. This one feels the safest to me. I mean, look at that cover. It's just got a ton of famous heroes. Supergirl's in it, and she's going to have a movie out this year. Shazam is on it, which we know a lot of people are Shazam fans. Green Lantern on the front cover. I just think this ticks a lot of boxes. It's a run that would probably be broadly popular. I think it's like an easy choice to make. And again, DC does seem like they're more actively looking for things from the 2000s to point out or print out or put out, whatever, what verb that was supposed to be. And if we're looking at like likely subjects like that are pretty popular in the 2000s, this feels like actually a pretty easy choice. Ryan, I'm not saying that Dixon doesn't have books out there. I'm saying that they tend to hedge and not put Dixon out in omnibus. We didn't get a Nightwing omnibus. We got a Nightwing compendium. We didn't get a Robin omnibus. We got a Robin compendium. I know that that's supposedly partly due to the art, but then Gail Simone, we got the Gail Simone Birds of Prey instead of getting a Dixon Birds of Prey first. It just feels like, can you find any omnibus, I could look at my sheet, but I'm busy hosting a show right now. Can you find any omnibus DC has sold that says by Chuck Dixon? I just don't think they think of him as an omnibus level seller, even though, honestly, I think that he is an omnibus level seller. Like, I think all of us have fond memories of it. It doesn't matter what his politics are now or anything. He was like one of the major voices of the 90s. So I think that's crazy. But I go by the data. My number 30 pick is another Batman book, because Batman makes the world go round. This is Batman Urban Legends Volume 2, asked for by no one. This was a Batman anthology book out in the early 2020s, so I guess I don't remember what zone of DC that was. Infinite Frontier, who knows? The point being, it was a shocker that DC released this recently, but again, they love releasing some new books. New books have to be, of a certain level of acclaim. They didn't have a lot of completed runs done at that level of acclaim, and so there's always money in Batman, and so they put out the volume 1 of this. What's interesting about this is they actually collected in sort of a nice way, because this has so many different anthology stories in each issue. Some of them run a couple of issues, some of them are one-shot stories, some of them get picked up later in the run. They actually collected it by story, so there's stories from across the run in the first book, I think all the way to issue 16, but there's not whole issues. Like if a storyline started in issue 12 and goes to issue 17, they saved it for this one. I think that's really clever. I wish Marvel would get with the program and sometimes collect their books like that. DC's just better at this than Marvel in some ways. But since there was a volume 1 out last year, and since it's like clearly missing material that could be put out in a volume 2, I think like put out a volume 2. I don't think this is under heavy demand, but I do think Bat Family probably sells decently for DC, so I don't think there's like any reason not to do it. Super Drop, I would buy that Zenescope Omnibus on day 1, and you know that is true. Okay. Grifter is sneaking into the Bat Family because Matt Rosenberg kind of used Grifter by way of backdoor piloting Wildcats into DC's continuity in that period, and they did that by giving Grifter a Gotham connection. My number 31 pick, Batman the Dark Knight, the New 52 Omnibus. Why? There's really not that much New 52 Batman left to collect, and DC seems to really want to have that all collected. We're kind of, as crazy as this is to say for us old fogies like me, we're kind of in the nostalgia period for New 52 at this point. Like, it's been 15 years. It's about to be the 15th anniversary of the New 52 book debuting in 2011. So there's nostalgia, those readers have money to spend, and newer readers are curious now about all of these crappy books. So this is really the last one. They just did Detective, and so this is like the next book to collect after Detective. It wasn't very good from my recollection, but does have David Finch art on the cover, and that makes it really easy to sell a book. Yeah, I have no nostalgia for this Dr. Zero. I just really don't have a strong interest in this, but there's always got to be Batman, and I just really think that this is an obvious choice. I mean, at the point that they're putting out Urban Legends, they're willing to put out stuff that people are not clamoring for because they know there are some Batman fans who will buy anything Batman. And at least this has some attractive covers on it. Oh, the most nothing burger Batman book ever. Okay. Logan always thought that Snyder's Batman was the majority of New 52 Batman. No, it's only like a fifth of New 52 Batman. There's so much more. Okay. Speaking of which, New 52, here's a book that we've been waiting for a sequel for a long time, Red Hood and the Outlaws. The volume 1 was out a while ago, and then they reprinted the volume 1 in 2025. And then this year, 2026, both of the subsequent Red Hood volumes, this and the following volume, made it into the top 60 of the Tiger Eyes poll. So now all of the stars are aligned for DC to put this out. They have a comparable sales data from 2025 on that reprint, plus the reprint is fresh in people's hands, so there's a reason for them to pick up a volume 2. And they see that it's popular with fans. It feels like this is finally the year next year. Red Hood has a very dedicated group of fans. I think they might have originally had it on the schedule for this year, but then that controversy with his new book and the writer of that book last year and how the book was canceled and withdrawn maybe put them off wanting to have Red Hood's name in the conversation at all. So I think this is a good chance to finally continue this. Thank you so much for the kind words, Kevin Barry, about loving these streams. Lance saying New 52 being nostalgic is so weird. They were my first Batman comics. I just think it's weird because I don't think there are that many new good comics in New 52. Bold choice. And maybe this is a bold statement. Maybe this is a future stream. I think pound for pound, Marvel Now from 2012 to 2015 was better than everything about New 52. I think you could go book for book and have a DC versus Marvel KO face-off, and Marvel will win the majority of rounds if we stack rank the books. Maybe that would be a really fun stream. I should start writing these down when I think of them. But yeah, I think New 52 was so crappy. I think it was so bad. I think there's no reason to revisit really any of it. But the heart wants what the heart wants if it's somebody's heart other than my heart. Okay, let's continue with all these Batman. I'm bound to be right on some of them. Yeah, I mean, there is like sort of kind of like, you know, throwing rocks at the side of a barn aspect of picking Batman books. Number 33, I did just tease this one, but I'm trying not to spoil things ahead of time. This is JLA Volume 3 by Joe Kelly and Denny O'Neil. Here's the thing. We waited 6 years to get the Volume 2 JLA by Mark Waid. And it made very obvious that DC is treating these as creator name books. They're going to skip around. They're not going to do a complete collection of this. That's what paperbacks are for. And that's fine. We know that about DC now. Their omnibuses are not like Marvel omnibuses meant to collect every single issue in order. DC is like, that's not what omnibuses are to us. Omnibuses are a prestige book that should read in a prestige way, and we're only going to put the things in them that read well. And if there's a random fill-in issue, we're not putting it in there. That's what DC Finest is for. That said, the question is, after waiting 6 years for a Volume 2 by Mark Waid, would we really get a Volume 3 by Joe Kelly only 1 year later? Especially with Kelly being a big writer for Marvel right now. He's the Spider-Man writer. Would you want to put out a DC omnibus of Joe Kelly? I just don't know. That's why I have this so low. I really think they're going to want to see how that Mark Waid book sells. If it sells like hotcakes, then there's easy money in this. It's easy to plan. The files are not hard. They've collected it 100 different ways. You know, I really think that then they just put it on the schedule for late in next year. I think that they're probably going to want to see how the Waid book does. Kurmai is saying, I love Joe Kelly's JLA. Darian Metalhead saying the Kelly run was so good. My number 34 pick is the first Silver Age pick you've seen me make on this entire poll. It is Batman and Superman World's Finest, the Silver Age Omnibus Volume 3. DC has gotten very tentative about Golden and Silver Age releases. There are some more things to do, and they've really been sticking to reprints. But maybe that's just because they feel like they don't want to put out new Golden Age stuff without the old Golden Age stuff being accessible and in print at the moment. This is one where it just feels like we're so close to closing out the line. Like this is the last one line. Then we'll be in Bronze Age. It'll end in 1970. It'll go to around issue 199 or 202, and then it will be done. And I just think that DC is showing an increased appetite in finishing things lately, and this has got Batman and Superman on the cover, so it ticks both the Batman box and the Superman box. I think there's really not a lot of Silver Age left to do. I mean, there's Batman and Superman, but like they've finished Flash, they've finished Justice League, they finished Green Lantern. I think this is an attractive one for them to finish before they start digging back into Batman and Superman, so that's why I have it on the poll, even though they have not done a lot of Silver Age recently. Okay. Number 35. Is it going to happen? Batgirl by Cassandra Cain, Volume 1. It's been number 1 on the Omnibus poll 2 years in a row. It was number 2 the first year, only number 2 to Tom King, and it was pretty much virtually tied with Tom King the entire time. The thing is, are the desires of internet fans representative of the desires of buyers as a whole? Which is to say, is Cassandra Cain really a seller on the level of Tom King? Well, DC now has some data on that because they put out a DC Finest of Batgirl. So now they can see, does a DC Finest of Batgirl sell as much as like 90s Batman? If it sold well, I think they have every reason to trust the result of the poll and be like, maybe it's time. If it just sold okay, as much as like any old Wonder Woman run or whatever, then I really think they're going to stick to Finest on this. There's another Finest to come out before the current Finest. There's a couple or maybe even 3 Finest to come out after the current Finest. I think that they just could stick to Finest. That would be fine, and they'll come back to this sometime later. That's why I have it so low in the poll. I think a lot of people would like this to happen, but since we're in Finest already, I think it's very dependent on how the sales are going of the Finest. James Rhodes saying, Cassandra is the Indiana Jones of the DC poll. Well, that's one of the dangers of these polls. They're for fun. They're not real market research. We're not like normalizing them in any way to make them market research. And I think that, you know, DC and Marvel would be wise to be careful from just putting things out that are on the top of the poll, because sometimes we're a bunch of weirdos making niche picks on the top of the poll. This is, you know, near mint condition viewers who are voting on the polls. It's not like everybody on the CBR forum. I think if we got an even wider amount of people voting on the polls, it would be even more Batman heavy and even more Spider-Man heavy and more X-Men heavy. So I think it's a good thing that the polls have some kind of like niche picks of obscure faves at the top, but I don't know that that necessarily means Batgirl Cassandra Cain would be the #1 selling omnibus DC could possibly release. Nick S saying, I recall Batgirl Finest went out of stock at a certain point and went back to print. That is my recollection as well. I think it's at least been on 2 printings. Number 36, Titans, The New Titans by Marv Wolfman, Volume 2. I am not 100% sure the DC is going to keep up a yearly pace of release for Titans. It just doesn't seem like they have to, and this 90s material that we're into is just not as highly regarded as the 80s material, so I think they're happy to just reprint the 80s material. Maybe this is like an every other year release. The one sign that they gave me that makes me think they're really serious about blowing through this is that Titans Volume 1 by Marv Wolfman out this year. It's 1,200 pages. Now, DC usually stays much smaller than that for their 70s and 80s books. If you look at the page counts of the revised editions of the Marv Wolfman Titan books, they're like 600 to 900 pages. 1,200 pages in a DC omnibus that's not like an all-in-one run is a lot. Like, they'll do 1,200 pages or more to put like all of Justice League Dark in one book. It is not super common for them to just do that like of a run of something that's like not multiple different runs threaded together. So the fact that they put 1,200 pages in that Volume 1 kind of signals to me that they're like, okay, they clearly have a map, they clearly have a plan, and they want to get through it. Like, if you thought that these were going to sell super, super well and that you could just stretch it out forever, you would make a tiny omnibus, as tiny as the Tom Taylor Nightwing omnibus. But they didn't do that. They made a huge omnibus. So that, to me, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, is DC saying, you know, oh, sorry, I got hair stuck in my face. There we go. Oh, snap out of it. Okay. That wasn't a good share. We'll try again later. 1,200 pages to me is DC saying, we know there's an audience for this, but we do not want to linger on releasing this forever. You're saying that it was DC's book back then, not at this point. Not when we got into the 1990s. It was their top book in the 80s. At this point, the balance had started to shift to other books. It was still very, very popular, but it wasn't quite the level that it was. So again, I think the big size, I feel like I've said this 5 times in a row, I've got to stop. I feel like the big size of the Volume 1 tells me there's a plan, and where there's a plan, there's a release schedule. Okay. If I could turn back time. Next, number 37, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Trinity by Kurt Busiek. Here's the thing. I always think this is an omnibus already. Like, every year when it comes up in the poll, I'm like, you assholes put something on the poll that it's already in an omnibus. And then I check, and it's not in an omnibus. It was just in 3 trades. To me, this is like such a gimme. And the reason DC puts out a lot of Justice League is because Justice League paints such a broad brush about getting a book out that has Batman, that has Superman, that has Wonder Woman, that has Flash, that has Green Lantern. It's also Justice League, but Justice League is partially the cast of Justice League. You know what I'm saying? So for them to have a book called Trinity that they could probably title the omnibus Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and it's by Kurt Busiek, it seems really obvious that you could put that out. And I just feel like, again, sometimes it just feels like the zeitgeist is moving in that way. There's a lot of DC 2000s era books coming out right now that kind of are filling in gaps that we've long had and oversized there. And this has a lot of great artists on it. It just feels like a book that DC could release. It would be a big one. They might be 2. It might be 2 books. But I think with these weekly series, they have incentive to do one big book. And we see them do a lot of one big books of the 2000 era books. So it feels very possible. Okay. Number 38, Outsiders by Judd Winnick. I will admit, this was not one that I had in my predictions up until we did the Tiger Eyes poll and I saw how well it did in the Tiger Eyes poll and heard Dom and Omar talking about it. Ultimately, I don't think DC has a lot of sales motivation to do this. Judd Winnick is not a super tested name in selling omnibuses. He's not even the headline name in the Archer's Quest book. Really, that's Kevin Smith. This doesn't have Batman in it. It's headlined by Nightwing. However, Nightwing is a pretty good omnibus seller. When we look at modern Nightwing from Flashpoint and on, DC loves to collect Nightwing and they sell really well. They've stayed in paperback for Nightwing for his 90s materials. So this could be a way, if they pick a cover which really is Nightwing prominent, or even call it Nightwing in the Outsiders. This could be a way of DC testing how much that Nightwing fervor translates to pre-Flashpoint. I just don't think it's a high priority for them, especially because this run is pretty huge and they actually would have to break it into two. I just don't see them being super motivated to make a commitment to a 2-book run of Outsiders. I just don't think Outsiders is a big seller in general. I think it's much more likely to get Finest. So why did they put it on there if I'm trash talking it? I think it was popular in the Tigrice poll. I think DC is looking for a certain amount of 2000s books to put out. And I think they would love to put out more Nightwing, and they're pretty much out of Nightwing, except for the Rick Grayson run, which they're probably not in a hurry to put out. So this is pretty much the next Nightwing the next earlier Nightwing that they could put out while they're still putting out his main series in Compendium. So that is why I think this is the one. Yeah, Edwin, those Trinity 3 connecting covers were what made it hard to pick a cover. This is one of the only covers the whole run that all 3 of them are on together, because so many of them are triptychs. Okay. Oh, hide that comment. Okay, let's continue. And by the way, as we're approaching the end here, if you want to keep talking to me after this is over, you want to get the link to the after show from the description of this video. Okay, number 39. Look, y'all. In the same way that I know that we're going to get some kind of Legends of the Dark Knight next year, I just feel it in my bones. I know that we're going to get something Martian Manhunter next. I just know it. Not because DC told me anything. I just know it because I just feel it. I just think it just is in the air tonight, Phil Collins. And it's because he does so well in the Absolute line, and because he's so widely recognized and so undercollected, and finally this has John Ostrander's name on it. So here's the thing. This is one of these coin flip ones. Maybe we don't get it in 2027 because they're waiting to release the last Suicide Squad by Ostrander. And then next year, maybe this is a 2028 book so that they can continue releasing things with Ostrander's name on it. That would not shock me. It would also not shock me if this comes out in DC Finest next year. That said, I really do believe we are getting this somewhere next year. I just think it's going to happen. So that's my prediction. It's on my ballot. I'm not saying you should put it on yours. That's just how I feel about it. I need this, says Gracie Patrick. And Kormai saying, so Nightwing wasn't at his best in that Outsiders run. See, I don't know that run at all. The problem is that Nightwing was going through a much disliked run at the same time. Interesting. Okay. Number 40. Now, I mean, you have to think. We're in my final 12 picks. Here's where I'm starting to take some risks. Demon Etrigan, Blood of the Demon by John Byrne and Will Pfeiffer. Why? This is probably the most obscure pick I've made so far. That said, DC on several occasions have picked a John Byrne run of something to put out first with no omnibuses on either side of that. They did it in Wonder Woman before they put out William Messner Loeb's, which still doesn't exist. They put out John Byrne. They did it for John Byrne's Doom Patrol. They did it for John Byrne doing Fourth World. DC knows John Byrne's name will sell an omnibus, and they will put out a John Byrne thing as like an anchor in the middle of a bunch of material for something. And then if that sells well, then they will put out omnibuses on either side of it. So I think there's not a lot of John Byrne runs left for them to do. I mean, he did a finite amount of work for DC. Etrigan is a character who does okay in collected edition, but tends to need a creator name attached to him in order to do okay. They just started a Finest line for him, so they could skip to this in Finest, but the Byrne name sells an omnibus, and that audience is rapidly aging. I'm talking about me included, even though I'm not a huge John Byrne fan, so it feels like this would be the time to strike to get a Byrne book out for this. This is by far my most obscure pick so far, but just looking at, I needed a couple things that were a little bit more niche in the mix, and I'm like, oh, this is a great pick because John Byrne sells books. Darian Metalhead saying this is the #1 book that he wants in his poll. Okay, could I not attempt to give this analysis in rhyme? The Demon Etrigan is somewhat niche, but DC released this book, sheesh. John Byrne is a well-established seller, and these books are selling to older and older fellers. I think it's about time this was released, and I hope we see it in print before John Byrne is deceased. Not good, scansion. The rhythm wasn't there, but I did make the rhymes work. Okay, here we go. Wonder Woman Golden Age Volume 7, God, hold on, I'm being praised by Lars Pearson here. I have to just take a moment and bask. Lars, who I'm working on a new podcast format that is not going to be the Lars Lore podcast that we always wanted, but maybe if I start my own podcast, I can get Lars to come on. By the way, Lars will be on the DC Finest results tomorrow at 5:30 in the afternoon. So if you want to hear Lars talking about DC Finest, please set your alarms now. Okay. Number 41, Wonder Woman, the Golden Age. Look, sometimes a dream is a wish the heart makes. And I just want this Wonder Woman material. What can I say? It's the final Golden Age book. And here's the thing. DC has not put out a Golden Age book since 2024. And a new one. They've reprinted. But do you know what that new Golden Age book was? It was Wonder Woman Volume 6. So here's the thing. In all the other Golden Age volume lines, they're like reprinting from number 1 to kind of get up to the present to then maybe start reprinting Silver Age to like make sure that the demand is there to put out a new volume. For Wonder Woman, the demand is there. Those of us who bought Volume 6 just bought Volume 6. They don't have to get all the way to reprinting Volume 6 in order to put out Volume 7. There's a lot of restoration to do on this. Most of this has never been collected before, but this will give us an unbroken run of Wonder Woman all the way from her creation all the way to 1971 or 2, wherever that Diana Prince omnibus ends. Like, that's a tremendous amount of Wonder Woman in omnibus. I think if there is one Golden Age book that there is a remote chance that DC puts out next year, it is this book. It's low on the poll because even though I want it bad, I don't have a strong prediction that it's going to happen. But I think if there is one new Golden Age book, this is the one. It just because it completes a line, and because the longer they wait from 2024 to put this out, the less of a good comparable the sales of those 2024 books were. And so then they have to be like, ooh, I don't know, is it going to sell? Right now, they probably have a pretty good idea of what it would sell because they know what Volume 6 sold. Now, if that sold really crappy, then I'm in danger. But I don't know. And so I really think if we get a Golden Age book next year, this is the book. Okay, number 42. It's the answer to the life of the universe and everything. And it is Batman Elseworlds Volume 2. Here's the thing. This year's DC's putting out Elseworlds omnibuses for Batman, Superman, and Justice League. Batman has the most Elseworlds material out of all three of those. Batman is a sure seller, and so much of this Elseworlds stuff has been reprinted before in different formats that it's not like it's going to be a heavy lift to put this out in omnibus. And Elseworlds is great because you can kind of just sell it on its own. Like, it doesn't need a volume preceding it. It doesn't connect to anything. It's just, you put Batman looking like a friggin' vampire on the cover and you just say it's Batman as a vampire and people just buy it because they like Batman Elseworlds stories. So I don't think there's a lot of risk here. I just think that there's no pattern established. DC did call all of those books Volume 1, so it does signal that they could put out more Elseworlds books, but we haven't seen a follow-up pattern on those books yet, so it's hard to know if like we really can predict this or not, but that's why I have it down here in the 40s. Golden Age books generally are not thought of to be big sellers. Again, we only can say that based on how quickly they sell out, how many people talk about buying them. I mean, there's no official sales data, so all of this is conjecture. Yeah. 2028 will be when we get the Wonder Woman movie, so putting this out next year is likely. I don't even know that that's a thing. I don't follow movies at all. No good for this stream. Why do I think Wonder Woman survived the Golden Age crash? Oh, interesting. I think that DC's plan, there's plans within plans. Nobody buys every single omnibus, right? And when they were only putting out 14 or 15 omnibuses a year, at that point, they might have been thinking that everybody buys every omnibus. But I think at some point, and again, I don't know this. I'm just trying to guess what I would do in their position. I think DC realized that there are certain characters where the fans will show up for a certain amount of things per year, something Marvel is not very good at doing. And so DC, I really think at some point realized, ooh, if we put out 2 Wonder Woman books a year, fans will show up for 2 Wonder Woman books a year. And the pace has been very consistent. So for a while, they were like, we'll do a modern book and we'll do a classic book. And people kept buying. And so since Wonder Woman fans kept showing up, they kept doing it. But I do think there was probably diminishing returns as we get to the higher numbers. And the restoration was probably getting more and more expensive because we're getting into issues that had been less and less seen in any other format. So I think that just with Batman and Superman, I think with Superman, it took them a while to know if people would show up for Superman every year. And I think what they discovered, and again, pure conjecture. I think what they discovered is that people mostly show up for Superman post-Crisis. I think there's just not as much excitement about pre-Crisis Superman. It's there and people like it, but I just don't think Superman fans care as much. Whereas Wonder Woman fans like actually want that Golden Age Wonder Woman stuff, because that's like so much of who her character is. This kind of like very patriotic, very woman in a man's world character. I think that Golden Age Wonder Woman actually kind of like sustains the interest that people have in her, even from the movie. Pure conjecture, but that is what I think might be the story there. Okay, number 43, Jonah Hex by Palmiotti and Gray, Volume 1. It's been over a year since we got Jonah Hex All-Star Western in Omnibus, which is the new 52 run of Jonah Hex by the same team. It would have been kind of Volume 3 of this if we had numbered them all sequentially. Jonah maybe doesn't have the selling power for a yearly omnibus, but that Omni came out, and there's been an extremely positive reaction to his DC Finest Western volume. So maybe we start doing like an every other year for Jonah Hex. There's only 2 more volumes here of the Palmiotti and Gray stuff to get out. It's incredibly popular. It did well on the Tiger Eyes poll. Again, we're pretty low in my predictions. I'm not by any measure saying that this is a sure thing, but I would take a chance on putting this on the schedule. Absolutely. Okay, next, number 44, Birds of Prey by Chuck Dixon, Volume 1. Here's the thing. I have no evidence that DC will put Chuck Dixon out in Omnibus. That's what's holding me back here. It seems so obvious that after Gail Simone's Birds of Prey doing well, that you would just backtrack for this one. And it's late enough in the 90s that I think the art might be in a good enough shape to put it out in Omnibus, because we've seen a lot of other omnibuses of late 90s DC stuff. This was pretty much coming out alongside like JSA, so there's no reason to think that they're going to have as much problem restoring the art as they do with mid or early 90s stuff. But would they put Chuck Dixon out in Omnibus? We've seen them take every opportunity to not put Chuck Dixon out in Omnibus. Ultimately, for me, this feels like much more likely to kick off a new DC Finest line next year, Birds of Prey, than it would be to come out in Omnibus. But there's enough of a chance, and I needed enough 90s material for my ballot here, that I was like, well, it could happen. And if it does happen, I would take the votes. But Always an Skater saying, I would bet we would see Kelly Thompson's run. I can't speak. We'd see Kelly Thompson's runs first. And Wiccan Solar saying, did Greg Land do that cover? Because his art is great. We know I'm the #1 Greg Land fan in all the land. But I actually don't know this era of Greg Land. I only know Greg Land from like 2010. This is 15 years earlier, Greg Land, when he was a very, very different artist. And then he left the title and then comes back later in the Gail Simone Omnibus. Okay, we're nearing the end here. Number 45, Animal Man, The Vertigo Years, Volume 3 by Delano and Prosser. I'll tell you, 2027 feels a little too soon for this book. There's the Volume 2 was out just a month ago, and I just don't know that Animal Man is an every single year seller. Kurimai, just by the way, pointing out that this particular cover is a Gary Frank cover. Land must be the internal artist. Okay, back to this. So, is 2027 too soon for this? Maybe. But DC is really good at finishing things out, and they also want to collect a lot of 90s. It just feels like they finally are like, yeah, let's just get all this Vertigo stuff out. Once it's out, we can reprint it whenever we want to reprint it. You got to put it out before you can reprint it, right? So I really think that this could be the year that we get it. If they push it out a year or two, I wouldn't be incredibly shocked. That is why it is so low in my picks. Number 46, this is really left field, but actually I had this much higher to point, and then I wussed out, and if it comes out, I'm going to be so angry I didn't leave it higher. This is The Brave and the Bold, the team-ups by Mark Waid from 2007 to 2010. So we're in a market that is hungry for Waid's approach to the current world's finest, right? This kind of very nostalgic, classic heroes being classic, heroes being mashed together, all the toys in the toy box, right? That's what this run is. It's basically just a team-up book. It's not, I don't think it's always Batman, but it's frequently Batman. And it's just a whole 35 issues of team-ups. I think that this is a hard sell because Brave and the Bold on its own might not be a good enough marketing name for an omnibus. But if you could say Brave and the Bold and Mark Waid in the title, I think that it's pretty good. And again, it could tick a Batman box depending on what you put on the cover there. So it does feel a little obscure, especially to like put out a whole omnibus just to team-ups. Like, it's not like a go-to run, but DC did just put out Batman Urban Legends, so it's not like they're opposed to putting out things that are not necessarily like the most important thing in continuity. So again, we're really low in my picks. I needed some picks from the 2000s. I think that there's a chance that this could come out. And it's Drop of Saturn saying they could use this design to complement whenever they collect his World's Finest. I completely agree. And see, not only are you the viewer that lives the closest to me, Wiccan, but we share the most opinions because you love Greg Land's art and Matt Fraction's X-Men. The longtime viewers of this channel can tell you that we must be sharing a little bit of a brain because I'm obsessed with that. We'll talk about it more in the after show. Okay, number 47, Batman Superman, the Rebirth Omnibus by Joshua Williamson and Jean Luen Yang. DC seems to be leaning into releasing a certain amount of Rebirth every year, and Rebirth didn't last forever. Unlike Marvel Fresh Start, which I think technically is still going, DC Rebirth really was only like 2.5 years before things started getting a different status quo, and they seem to be pretty aggressive in collecting the hotter stuff out of Rebirth quickly. The thing is, Joshua Williamson is also one of the big architects for DC. He's currently writing Superman, and he just had a 3-volume Flash Omnibus set complete, and they, I think, sold pretty decently. So this is a chance to get out a Batman book and a Superman book, a Batman and Superman book, a Batman and Superman book by the current writer of the very strong-selling Superman series, of the writer who just sold 3 Flash Omnibuses that were out in this same period, so it's a good comparable, and it never hurts to put Jean Luen Yang's name on a book, because in the book market, he's actually a much more notable writer than he is in the comic market itself. Again, my number 47 choice, I'm not saying this is definitely going to happen. I'm saying maybe it might happen, but it doesn't feel totally out of the question. Here, George Al's in the barn pointing out that George Perez and here's his name on the cover right above the little Chiron, drew about a third of Brave and the Bold by Mark Waid et al. So again, and Edwin Billiot saying George Perez at his peak. See, I didn't even know that. So maybe it should say by Mark Waid, George Perez and all. And if you could put George Perez in the title of the book, then I should have put it higher on the list. Do I throw Williamson's Batman issues between Tynion and Zdarsky? The way we did it on the poll, because a lot of people had feedback on that when we put it up for consultation, is that you probably want to put the Williamson Batman issues together with his Robin run, because actually Robin's in those Batman issues and they kind of go together. So I really think what that book is that fits between Tynion and Zdarsky could be Batman and Robin by Williamson, but you could also put them here. I mean, there's a lot of options, and DC, once we're under the guise of collecting under a certain creator's name, then DC has room to play. The reason I don't think they would put these here is because then I think they wouldn't put the Jean Luen Yang issues in here because it would just become a creator name collection, and then it's kind of like, well, then where do they go? I just think it creates more problems. Oh, you know, I didn't put Earth 2. I mean, they might put that out in an annual release schedule. They are releasing a first one this year. It's got good names on it. It just, to me, it did not scream release a second one right away. But DC's really good about following up, so maybe I gave up some points there. Okay, only 5 picks left. Number 48, Supergirl by Peter David. Here's the thing. There's always a possibility that this might come out. Even though DC is doing it in DC Finest right now, it does not mean that it has to come out only in DC Finest. We've seen them release things in the same release window. It's super popular. It's the Peter David name. I think you would be foolish to at least not throw this at number 52 on your poll and just reap that 1 point. Like, I really think that you would be silly not to just take the point. I had no idea that you all would have 1,000 things to tell me about this Brave and the Bold run when I put it on here. Rand saying the Brave and the Bold would be able to go off the Supergirl and Lobo crossover as it influences the Supergirl movie. This is like, I don't have that much experience with DC, so you have so many more factoids about DC than I do. Okay, number 49, Checkmate by Greg Rucka. Again, I think with Rucka writing for DC right now, they're going to want to market some of his stuff. I think Rucka is one of those names where DC can get away with putting out a slightly more obscure run. I'm not saying this run is bad. It's really a well-loved run. I'm just saying it's not one of DC's marketable franchise names. And if you look at their history of omnibus releases, almost every DC omnibus has a marketable franchise name on it. That's just how DC rolls. But this would have Greg Rucka's name on it. So maybe it is possible, especially if they put possibly my number 3 favorite DC character, Mr. Terrific, on the cover there, and he's been in the movies now. Maybe there's a way to make this sell. So I don't think it's entirely out of the realm of contention. Okay. Next, we have Vigilante by Marv Wolfman. You saw this also in my DC Finest personal picks. I think DC is in the process of discovering that there's a lot of people who will just show up for 80s stuff. I think the question book showed them that. I think they're seeing that if they put out 80s material, I think the Finest are showing that a lot of fans have been waiting for so long, and Vigilantes in the Peacemaker show. Now, I've already articulated this all like only a week ago, 2 weeks ago on my DC Finest picks, which is that I just don't know if Peacemaker's stuff as a comp is omnibus selling. I think Peacemaker's audience of the TV show would probably be more likely to pick things up in paperback. That's why I have this so low, but it could be a big all-in-one book or 2 books, right? Because it's 50 issues, 2 annuals, and then he's got some guest appearance and crossovers. So it could be like a Mike Grell Green Arrow size book, or it could be 2 books more the size of the question. But it's got Marv Wolfman's name on it, which is a pretty sure seller. So again, this is one of those ones like Supergirl that I would just be angry to not put it on my picks and then have it come out and then be like, gosh, darn it, like I should have put it on there. It came out. And I would love for this to happen, but I actually agree with Yorna Pauls that this is probably much more likely to come out in DC Finest. Okay. Only 2 more. Number 51, Harley Quinn, The Birth of Mirth by Dini Kessel and Dodson. DC has really gotten softer on Harley Omnis. They're much like Deadpool. I think there was just a moment in time, one moment in time. I think there's one moment in time where Deadpool and Harley were the it girls of their respective publishers, and everybody would buy anything by them, and I think that moment in time has passed. So DC has gotten much softer on putting Harley out in the same way that Marvel has gotten much softer on putting Deadpool out. However, this book has the Dini, Kessel, and Dodson names on it, big names, and it lets you put out a Harley book with her in her classic Harlequin costume, which I think like has a different impact than showing kind of modern movie Harlequin with the dip-dyed ponytails or pigtails. And they did put this out in Finest, so now they have a comparable for how well it sold in Finest. If they saw a lot of demand for it in Finest, I think it's a chance to put it out in Omnibus. If the demand was not there in Finest, I think we don't get it. I'm saying hello to Vanessa the Witch, who's made it here just in the nick of time. And Superjob saying, I suggest they change the name to The Mirth of Birth. Okay, we only have one more. What is my final pick that might get 1 point, 1 prized point for me if this comes out in Omnibus? It is Gotham Academy. I don't think DC will do this. I think it is largely kids' book, and I think kids' books get paperbacks. DC has a 0 for 0 track record of putting out their kid-focused books in Omnibus. It is not something they do, and I think that's because DC knows the book market, and they know you do not try to sell a $100 book to a child. So I don't think it is very likely. That said, I think also that they're completing Gotham Academy Year 1 right now, which makes it attractive to collect everything in all in one book. And I think the people who read this originally back in 2014 are now 12 years older. And so if they were 10 to 12-year-olds then, they're 22 to 24-year-olds now, and they might have a little bit of spending money to spend on an omnibus. I revere this run. I think it is absolutely amazing. I think it's delightful to read. It's absolutely beautifully drawn. The characters are excellent. I would recommend it to anybody. It is not just a kid's book. It is basically Magic Academy set in Gotham. And the great thing is that not all of the kids are just a kid of some supervillain, so it's not like The Descendants. It's not like Strange Academy where like there's this one-to-one relationship between every kid and every Batman villain. They're their own characters, and they're great characters. But all of Batman's villains are kind of like around. Like one of them is a teacher, one of them sponsored a new wing. So it's like very much in the world of Batman. So it's in current continuity. I just love it a lot. I think it's very unlikely to get an omnibus. And I probably, what is that one I was saying I should have put on here? No, I forgot. There was one a couple slides back that I'm like, you dummy. Oh, Earth 2. This should be Earth 2. But I'm not changing it. These are my picks. But I should have put Earth 2 here, and that's what I should have done. So do you agree with my 52 picks? Do you disagree with my 52 picks? Are you ready to make your own ballot? So now that you've seen that, let me go back to explaining the way that this works. So in the description of this video, there's a link to this sheet, and it's a sheet that anybody with the link to the sheet can access. And so if you access this sheet, you will see this, but you won't be able to edit it. You will have to make your own copy by going to File, Make a Copy, and that will make it in your own Google Drive. Once you have made your own copy, then you can start going through your picks. This first sheet, the Build Your Draft pick sheet, is a sheet that has everything that was on the DC Tiger Eyes poll this year. And what you do is if I change this, it'll be this for everybody. So I'm only going to change it for a second. You make a pick. And once you make a pick, things start calculating. It gives you your average popularity score. It judges how you're doing in Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and Justice League, Flash, Lanterns, licenses, gold and silver, bronze, blah, 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 blah. So as you start entering your picks, you get graded here in the sheet, and you get graded here on the validation sheet as well. You will need to turn all of these green in order for your ballot to be approved. So you've got to fit within the common DC ranges of all the things we're grading on. The popularity of books, the spread of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Justice League to make it a little easier on you. I didn't put Flash and Green Lantern in there, and the spread across years. As you start entering things here, they will start entering here on your final draft picks. It has 52 spots in it, and this is how you'll be able to quickly review where you are. Since this, you could spend quite a while going through. There are 700 total books in here, almost. So the thing is, you can sort this any which way. Right now, it's just sorted alphabetically. You can use the little drop downs and sort by anything. You could sort by start year, end year. You could sort by popularity, only Batman books. You could also filter. You could do whatever you want. So since this is so destructible and it doesn't really matter what order it's in, all the other sheets should work. This will kind of just capture your picks as you go, so you know that it's totally filled and you've got a full ballot. Now, what we didn't have before is how to submit your picks. If you care to show me your picks and participate, I'm going to show you here on my Marvel one, because I've actually finished my ballot. On my Marvel one, I have all 60 of my picks in, so this sheet is entirely filled in. And as they start getting announced, like Secret World's Battle World was announced, I could put an X, and then it'll start scoring my points, right? So once I've got all those picks in, this sheet will light up, and even though it cuts off at 40 here, it does keep going. And you just hit copy here, you go to this form, and you paste it into the form. And here we can see I already started the form, so you can see me paste it in. When you paste it in, it might have a quote mark at the beginning of it. That's fine. You can't do any editing on this. I don't want you to change anything, because if I'm actually going to score people's ballots against each other, this data is built exactly like the data I already have backstage, so I can tear it apart and I know exactly what to do with it. So it's not meant to be edited. You're meant to just straight up copy and paste. One new thing I added to the sheet as well is a way to just track the 27 releases as they go. And so you could just keep track them this way if you want. I will track them officially for you in these sheets too. So here we are in the Marvel sheet. I'm just tracking everything Omar has announced so far, and then commenting on, is it mapped exactly like the poll? And then it compares it to my ballot to say how many points I have got here. So if you want to update your Marvel sheet, you just go to these two new sheets and you just do copy to, and you pick your existing spreadsheet and copy them to your existing sheet. They should just work right out of the box as long as they are named the same thing. And you haven't renamed anything else. For the DC one, all of this stuff is built right from the beginning, because I figured it out based on your feedback from the first poll. So if you make your own copy of the DC sheet, you are ready to go. So you don't have to do this. Nobody's making you do this. I just heard the first time that people were really interested in playing along at home. And since I spent all of this time in the data, I wanted to give you the ability to make your own ballot if you want. So Vanessa, the way the fantasy picks work is you're trying to pick what you think Marvel and or DC are going to put out as brand new omnibuses next year. You're trying to fill out a release slate that is exactly the way that they currently release omnibuses. So it's got to have a mix of the same characters and eras that they've recently put out in their recent years. It's only for the data obsessives among you, and you can play the game at home without like submitting or taking it seriously. Just use it for whatever reason you want to use it for. It's the first time I've ever released any part of the data from the Tiger Eyes poll in this fashion. So just enjoy it. But I will say that once we get through all of the January through June Marvel Omnibus releases and I do my recap with Omar, I will be back on the channel and I will be talking about how I did on my ballot prediction so far, things I'm excited about, things I regret. Similarly for DC, once DC has announced all of their omnibuses through June, I will come onto the show at that point and talk about them. So that's why I wanted to give you all the chance to submit your picks, because then I can say, look, oh, out of everybody, it's actually Vanessa the Witch who has the best scoring ballot for the first half of the year. So I don't know how much I'm going to do that, if there's going to be prizes. I don't know, because it all depends on how many of you submit. Let's say if under the 10 of you submit, then I'm probably not going to make a big deal of it. And if more than 10 of you submit, I'll actually make it a little competitive. Okay, so I'm so excited to have finally done this. I've been wanting to do this for 2 years now. It took a tremendous amount of work, but now that I figured it out on the Marvel side, now there's kind of like machinery for it. And so now I should be able to do this every year if it's popular, if you care. So tell me what you think in the chat now or in the comments below. What do you think about my DC fantasy draft picks for 2027? Did I pick all the omnibuses you expect to see? Did I leave some easy money on the table? Are there ones that you are extraordinarily surprised that I didn't pick? Are there things that you think I picked that are insane? I will say if I got two, like, what was it called? Sideboard, like extra, what is that called? Like picks on the bench. I can't think of the name. If I picked two from the bench, I would probably put Earth 2 and Bronze Age Wonder Woman. Those are the two that I'm like, oh, I probably should have put them on there. But who knows? DC works in mysterious ways. Thinking of all the mysterious ways DC works, tomorrow at 5:30 on Near Mint Condition, I will be announcing live the results of the first ever annual DC Finest Most Wanted poll. We got over 3,000 votes, so this poll is just as big as one of the Tiger Eyes polls. We're going to be counting down the top requested lines and the top requested volumes. Then what am I doing next week on this channel? I don't friggin' know. It's the end of the poll season. Just let me breathe for a minute, Dad. But I am going to be back next week and we will be doing something. I just haven't quite settled on what that will be yet. Bench players. Thank you, Rand. The players on the bench. And for those of you who are watching live, we're going to progress directly from this directly into an after party. So grab that after party URL right now. Here's what I will say as we wrap up. The thing that, thank you for your support. It's so awesome to be able to come on and speak to hundreds of you live, have thousands of you watch after the fact. It's an extreme privilege to do. I'm extremely excited that I get to do it. You are my friends and family that I get to see every week, and it's really important to me to get to talk to you. So thank you. Crushing Krisis should be fully functional at this point. It's totally transitioned to a new host. And so now poll season over, I finally get to start updating it again, which I am so excited to do because it has been so broken for so long. And now that is no longer the case. So I'm really excited about that. And also supporting me on Patreon helps. And we're inching ever closer to me actually being able to update the Patreon tiers. There's been a lot of work to get there, but that is coming very soon. And it really does help. I had to buy... Oh, I need a new thing for the studio here. You'll see when it gets here, and it costs money, and it's really nice when I can turn to Patreon for that. So as I say farewell to here, I will give you the message that I always give. Trans lives matter, like queer people in your life matter. There are attacks, both legislative and physical, on queer people all around the world. There's one happening in New Zealand now with a definition of man and woman bill, which is BS, but that's also happening all around the United States. There's violence against queer people in the UK. Please be a real life superhero. If you are looking at these, your favorite characters at DC, Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, Flash, what would they do? They would defend everybody who needs defending. And so I hope you're living those values in your life too. But you know, a different thing occurred to me this week, which I'm going to add, and this is not a protected class of people, but it's just something that occurred to me this week. In New Zealand, every time people get off a public bus, they say, "Thank you, driver." It's just the thing that everybody does. It's part of the cultural fabric here. And I was brought up when I lived in Philadelphia, which the drivers usually don't want to talk to you on SEPTA, the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority in Philadelphia. But I was brought up that you always say thank you with a smile to that driver, because you know what? That's their job, and they are letting you off at your stop and getting you where you go, and you should be thankful for them in that job. You should be thankful for everybody in every job. It's fun. It's easy to be like, I'm so thankful for the doctors who saved my life. I'm thankful for the doctor who fixed my elbow. Are you thankful for the nurses? Are you thankful for the orderlies? Are you thankful for the people that are picking up your trash and recycling? Are you thankful for the people at the supermarkets? A lot of you are these people. I've been these people. And I just think that while we're also giving love and respect and protection to the protected classes of people in our life that need protection, like trans and queer people, like Black people, like Asian people, like immigrants, I think also let's just take a moment and like love the people who are putting in the friggin' hard work to make our world go round. Like, I really appreciate them, and I think that we should be saying thank you, driver, everywhere. So I just like thank those people in your life, and if you're one of those people that are in one of those many things, many roles that help the world go round, and you're putting in manual long hours of labor to make it go round, thank you. I really, really appreciate it, because you making the world go round lets us all have the fun that we want to have. And without you, the world would not go round. So let's make sure that we remember that trans lives matter and that queer lives needs protecting. And let's remember to say thanks for the people who make this world great for us. And for that reason, I will say that's all I've got to say today. And I don't want you to have a crisis, except for tomorrow on Omar Stream or any other time that it might be me. Thanks so much.